Hello, fans, everyone around the world, Formula One fans, wherever you are, in whatever time zone you're in, wherever you are, whether it be Northern Hemisphere, Southern Hemisphere, just amazing. I love talking about that because the internet still is staggering, isn't it? What it can achieve. Anyway, welcome to the live stream. Thanks for joining us and looking forward to your questions and comments in this rather weird, I don't know, what is it? It's a twilight zone in which we're finding ourselves at the moment, isn't it? It's a very strange time for Formula One. For those of us used to, I mean, we complain quite a lot, don't we, about there being too many races on the calendar, I suppose. This is one way around it. But I think those of us that did complain always used to think, well, let's get back and do a bit of testing as well, because that would be, that's quite a nice substitute, isn't it? But no testing in this period. Lots of CFD, lots of wind tunnel, lots of beavering away in the various design departments, I suspect, and trying to work within the budget cap. Lots of refiguring and configuration of the budget cap because of where we're going at the moment. So yeah, it's weird and fairly quiet. It's rather strange to have a pretty empty F1 orientated inbox at the moment. But there you go. This is where we're at. One of the things that I got super excited about the Japanese Super Formula series when I heard that Kalle Rovanperä was going to do it, and of course he's not doing it now because he couldn't get around the illness problem of whether it's racing single seaters, whether it's a full face helmet that does it that he's not used to, whether it's something else to do with driving after you've been flying, whatever. I don't know. I mean, it sounds like he's got a dizziness thing, and he's not doing that championship. But nonetheless, that did spark my interest in it, and I was fascinated to see the first two rounds take place at Motegi last weekend, and that was good stuff. But I thought it was quite interesting, whether it's significant, coincidental, or what, that after the race, both Roman Stanek, who we know from Formula 2, and Zach O'Sullivan, equally, both were ill after the race. Strange, isn't it? I wonder whether it's a commuting thing from, as I say, flying and then driving, flying in time change difference thing. I mean, we Formula One drivers, top level drivers do that all the time, so it shouldn't really be an issue. But there's a strange pattern there, isn't there? I remember years ago, Ross Cheever, who I was still am very good friends with, he was super quick in Super Formula, won a lot of races. And he used to, for a while, he used to commute from Italy, where he lived. And he said it was just too much, just couldn't do it. So he had to base himself out in Japan. And he quite liked it after a while. I think he got to cooking the pasta in the corridors of the hotel, and all the other European drivers would gravitate towards Ross's room and share the pasta most nights. Yeah, so interesting. But yeah, just going on to this Motegi event, it was strange. It was it was strange in a way because unbelievably bad weather on the first day, Saturday, and pretty nice weather on Sunday. So a big variation and not a lot going on the Saturday as a result in terms of racing laps. But for me, it's always interesting to see Motegi because that is very near Toshigi, which is a big Honda place in Japan, north of Tokyo. And that is where we went in '86 with Nelson Piquet and Nigel Mansell to demonstrate the Williams Hondas, having just won the World Championship, Constructors World Championship anyway. And there was no Japanese Grand Prix at the time. So we sent out a small team. And I actually engineered it for an event or two, not the one at Toshigi, but I'm glad I didn't because it was Nelson driving that day. And it was on the banking, which later became the oval that IndyCar used there when it was renamed Motegi. And Nelson did about 5 laps before the tyres just collapsed because of the vertical G through the tyres, which obviously the tyres not built for that, the Goodyears. And so that was a bit of a disaster, that one. But it was, that's always held an interesting place in my mind, Toshigi, and that is now Motegi, and that's what we see. Anyway, let's just have a look and see what actually happened there. And look back, and big thanks to the organisers of the Super Formula series for these short highlights. First race was held in very, very wet conditions, which combined with the new track surface made life very difficult in terms of visibility and standing water. Two Honda-powered cars on the pole, Ayumu Iwasa, who we know from Formula 2 and also as the reserve driver for Racing Bull's Ford Red Bull powertrain in Formula 1. And behind him, the very talented and experienced Kakunoshin Ota. It's a relatively clean getaway after 15 laps behind the safety car, with Iwasa confirming his pole, taking the lead easily into turn one, looking good. But almost straight away, there's disaster. Luke Browning has no radio communication, and there is an incident involving Kamui Kobayashi, which sends out the safety car. But Browning, unsighted in the heavy spray behind Zach O'Sullivan and Senna Sakaguchi, suddenly sees these two cars slowing, has no warning at all that the safety car conditions have been reapplied, dives between the two, clips the left front of O'Sullivan. This is very high speed and spins to the inside, holding the slide really well. The other defining moment of the race was at the beginning of lap 20 at the restart. Look at the job that Kakunoshin Ota is doing in P2 there, getting the brakes and tyres absolutely perfect. Great pass by Ota to take the win. And Ren Sato, who raced alongside Iwasa in French Formula 4 for a season before going back to Japan, a very good third, making it a 1-2-3 for Honda in the wet, but only half points because only 23 of the 37 scheduled laps were actually run. Race 2 was thankfully dry, with Ota now lining up on the pole ahead of Toshiki Oyu's Toyota-powered car and Iwasa in P3. Oyu made the best start, held the inside line into turn 1, and then took the lead beautifully into turn 2. The cars look very darty, though, on this new track surface as the Yokohama's yet to get up to temperature. Then there's contact between Toyota's Igor Fraga, the Japanese-Brazilian driver, and Tomiki Nojiri, with Roman Stanek, we know from Formula 2, also in trouble, and Rikuto Kobayashi in the gravel trap. This all brought out the safety car. Although leading strongly at the restart, it all went away for Oyu when his team decided to stop strangely early for new Yokohamas at the end of lap 10. Tyre degradation was low though, and Ota was able to consolidate his lead while others looked at more creative strategies. Fukuzumi stayed out until lap 30, and Luke Browning, showing great tyre management and also presumably hoping for a safety car at some point, stayed out until the penultimate lap. As a result, Nirai finished third, the best result ever for this team, and Browning an excellent P4 from the back of the grid. It was tense in the closing laps as Ota ran into gearshift problems, but he held on to win by just under a second from Senna Sakaguchi. So it was Ota's Honda-powered car ahead of a bunch of Toyota runners, Zach O'Sullivan finishing 6th, but Charlie Wirtz, son of Alex Wirtz, who's already raced in Formula 3 and shown considerable pace, only P20 in his first Super Formula race. Yeah, really good stuff. And what I love about Super Formula is that difference in the power plants. They don't talk about it very much, oddly. I don't know why, but Honda versus Toyota, a big battle going on there. And that's what makes, for me, Super Formula more refreshing than Formula 2, where everything is supplied by one supplier. And it's, I won't go too far into that, but I think it's a lot more difficult to find an edge. Well, it's a lot more difficult to explain why you're slow in Formula 2 than it is in Super Formula. There are more things you can adjust and play with, and there are more variables in Super Formula, and it's a proper championship. It really is a proper championship. Great drive there by Luke Browning, I thought. When he had that shunt in the wet, incredible reflexes, and he just went straight through a gap. He was flat out, went straight through that gap, and then spun on the grass, didn't hit anything. Really good car control. And then, you know, to come in on the penultimate lap as he did and get a good result in race 2, very, very good. But it just shows the internet. When that happened on Sunday, a lot of people were sort of videoing the TV screen and they put it out on YouTube and stuff. And quite a lot of the comments were, well, why was he going so quickly behind the safety car? Well, the whole point was the race was on then and he couldn't see the safety car boards because of or the flags or whatever, lights, because of the spray, and his radio wasn't working. So when he had that incident, he was still racing. That is the point. Yeah, he did get a penalty and all the rest of it. But, you know, to me, that was, you know, this nice bit of driving there. And I thought the other interesting thing was Nirai Fukuzumi, because as you see, I mentioned he finished third. And I interviewed him actually just before his race at the Nürburgring. He did the same race as Max, and really good guy, big buddies with George Russell, Alex Albon, Jack Aitken probably still, and a few others, Nick De Vries, because of the time he did in Europe in Formula 3 and a little bit in Formula 2 as well. Didn't go very well with Carlin at that point. Sorry, with with Christian Horner's team. But it's great to see him back again on stream, and he's got the backing of, look at this, see if you can identify that, who's congratulating him through the mesh fencing. That is Morizo, the chairman of Toyota, and that's because he owns that team. It's a one-car team that Niraj is driving for. He owns that team, Morizo, and it's called Rookie Racing, I think, or Rookie Racing Team, something like that. And it's not for rookies. It's because Morizo's dog is called, or was, I hope he's still with us, is called Rookie. And that's why they called the team Rookie. So isn't that brilliant that he drives directly for the chairman of Toyota? And I asked him in the interview, he's got these close ties. He's got an opportunity now to maybe get into Formula One, because obviously Toyota have a link now with Haas, and he's a good guy. And he's done his homework, and he's eaten road dust in Europe. And if he continues to go well in Super Formula, we're going to watch him. And that's my new focus for Super Formula. We'll see how he goes. Anyway, that video I did with Niraj was for members only, but I'll make it public after this video, and you can all have a look and just reacquaint yourselves with the great Niraj Fukuzumi, who, whenever I saw him, when he was in Formula 3 and all those years ago with George and Jack Aitken, he was always just doubled over in laughter. And he and George were just massive, whatever. They'd had a good laugh together. Very good laugh. So yeah, that was it. Now let's get on to your questions and comments. See what is on your minds today, if I can. I might have to reboot the browser yet again. It's always this same old story, isn't it, with this thing? Just give me 2 seconds while I do that. Right. No, can't get the browser to operate now for some reason. Why is that not working? What I'm gonna have to do, this worked perfectly, as the same old thing. I did 3 rehearsals of this just to make sure it was all working this time. But of course it's not now. And so I properly have this browser and I can actually see what I'm doing with you guys. I want to get this working. It'll probably fail again. And you may say, I think I've gone through all this before, but why we do this browser system that I have for the pop-out chat. It's because I actually like the look of it when it is working on screen. I think it's quite a cool thing, but equally it's giving so much trouble, endless trouble, that probably at some point we're going to have to pull the plug on it and look for something else. Anyway, let's have a look and see what's going on. Right, here's the first question, I think. Looks like it's there. Sorry about all this. Yeah, there we go. So the first question is from, I'll bring up my version so I can read a bit here. Paulette, 111, with his relative lack of high-speed corner skill nullified by the new regs, if Kimi were to become world champion, would it be a devalued win? Well, yeah, relative lack of high-speed corner skill. Yeah, that's something we've talked about, and it shouldn't be too tough on him. I mean, he's getting better, I think, but I don't think it's going to matter as much. So you're right in that sense. And in the context of the great fast corner drivers of his era right now, i.e., Max Verstappen, Charles Leclerc, who would be another good fast corner? I'd say George. Yep. Probably Oscar as well, and maybe even Lando. Then, yeah, Lando with his throttle off, brakes off, neutral car going into a corner like Pouhon, definitely. Or not Pouhon, into Pouhon. In the wet, yeah, definitely. Then I think it would be. But then again, from another perspective, it's still a race between him and George Russell. And if he beats George to the championship this year, I would say from Kimi and Tonelli's point of view, that makes it a very valid world championship, because he's beaten his more experienced, in theory, faster, better teammate, the number 1 driver, if you like, to win the world championship. And that's enough. If you do that, and racing ultimately is about the guy in the other car. And if you've got a very good car and you dominate the championship, that's fine, but you've got to see who you're beating as well in the other car. And when Nigel won it and walked away in 92, he did actually destroy Riccardo Patrese, who was not bad at all in 91. So he just did a much better job with the active car than Riccardo, and that's valid, and it will be, I think, for Kimi Antonelli, because if he is champion, he will have beaten George Russell. So there you go. Next one, I'll just readjust this so it's properly on screen now. 1 second. Here we go. There we go. This is from Sarosh. Hi, Sarosh, one of our regulars. Thanks for your support. Peter, Ross Brawn, in his book, said that Alesi was a real talent, but the issue was that Berger was quite good in playing games, and that affected Jean. This was in the Benetton. Was Jean a short corner driver? Well, in the sense that Rob Wilson defines a short corner driver, Jean was not, in the same way that Sebastian Vettel was not. They did actually turn in incredibly early in quite a linear way. Jacques Lafitte was another, but it was much more of a V, and there was not a lot of braking against increased steering load going into a apex or a rotation point. Most of it was straight lining it down to a V point. And as I say, with a guy like Max, for example, he's not the only one on the planet for sure, and indeed in the history of the sport, there have been hundreds as good as, well, that's an exaggeration, 50 probably. But for a guy like Max, it's all about how you get the car whilst you're braking, while you get it into a rotation point, and there are lots of curves. The car is cornering, and the corner is tightening. And the corner is tightening up while he's doing that, and he's massaging everything through the pedals, mainly brake, release of brake pedal pressure, how he's coming out of the brakes, how he's using the steering at that specific moment. All of those things are all what I call about, when I was talking about multitasking, and it's all those dynamic weights out there. With Alesi, he had a much simplified style of driving, and there were, if you like, the dynamic weights were more linear and therefore more logical. Should I say easy? Probably not. Who am I to say easy? But certainly more logical way of handling them. And the same with Vettel. If you watched Alesi drive, he was just boom, straight down to a V on most corners, and you'd think, wow, that's amazing. How does he do that? And of course, it was a good thing. He had a feel for how to extend the straight a little bit longer, and he'd stay almost flat on the throttle while he's still starting to turn the steering. And then he'd just keep it in a straight line and go right down to a very slow rotation point of V. And Jacques Lafitte the same. And providing they had had a decent car with a good front end, obviously great back end to enable them to have the rotation they wanted, then they got away with it. But there were moments, of course, when Alesi wasn't very quick, and that was because of that. So yeah, I think Ross, it's an understandable comment from a fairly typical Formula One engineer who assumes that there is only one way to drive the car. And I think that's what we're seeing today even. The drivers get in and they do this. And this corner is this gear, it's this speed, and they're going to harness this amount of energy, whatever they do. And they don't take into account all the little things that I've just been describing, the nuances of their styles. And they are small things, obviously. We're talking about nanoseconds of reaction, difference between Max and, say, I don't know, Gerhard Berger. And so, but Ross, like most engineers, wouldn't have looked at it in that way. He would have looked at it, these are the results. How do I explain that? I see Berger doing a few clever tricks behind the scenes there and making sure he got this set of tires, or was running a bit lighter here, or didn't do the test there, so he was fitter for the following day. Whatever it be, that's what they would see. Berger's a bit, he's a bit quick on that, isn't he? And Jean's a sort of scapegoat. That's how they would see it. Because I've never heard an engineer talk in detail about driving, because it just doesn't, it's not in their hemisphere to talk about it. They just don't do it. And I think, just as an extension of that, I think most engineers probably quite like the current regulations, because, and I was chatting to a friend on WhatsApp about this morning, who's a musician, and he was likening what Formula One is going through now to the digitization of music. and how it became very difficult to remain a musician in italics, in the true sense of the word, when everything was going digital. And you could just press a button and there's your brass section, or there's your string section, or whatever it was. And yet the human being still wanted to be something slightly different. And I think it's the same in Formula One. I mean, he's hit the nail on the head, because, it's quite difficult now for Max Verstappen to be a racing driver in italics, because there are so many digital restraints around him now. This is what we're going to do here. This is the harnessing we've got to do there. This is the deployment we've got to do here. That it's a very similar thing, isn't it? And that's, I think engineers quite like that, don't they? They quite like that pigeonholing of everything, and everything is in their control, because that's what an engineer likes. But the artist, musician, the racing driver, in the true sense of the word, has to keep fighting the battle and find areas in which he can still hopefully perform. I thought, it's an interesting point my mate made, John Clark. Really good guy. Percussionist, actually, in case you're wondering about it. Percussionist who, we lost Neil Sedaka relatively recently, and he actually played, I think he did a concert tour with Neil Sedaka, playing in the orchestra with him. And he, like most people who love to trash Sedaka, he said, the guy was unbelievably talented and musical. And he'd never, in fact, he said he'd never met anybody so musical as Neil Sedaka. There's a song he did called Wheeling, West Virginia. It's the only Neil Sedaka song I ever loved, but I love it if ever you hear it. This is from another one from Soros. No problem with Soros, because he's a channel member, and he's one of our great staunchest followers. And thank you very much indeed for all your questions. Peter, you were mentioning that Carlos Reutemann was a big fan of Walter Roll. Who isn't? Smiley face. Can you give insights as to what he was observing about Walter that impressed him? Well, Carlos was also a big fan of Ingemar Stenmark, the brilliant Swedish, I think, anyway, slalom skier, the best in the world at the time. And what he loved about both Roll and Stenmark was how, in Carlos's view, they knew exactly the right amount of slide to have on the car without slowing it down, but just getting the change of direction you wanted, or the skis for that matter. And he used to show me pictures of comparing Stenmark, then the spray coming out of Stenmark's outer ski compared with others, and there'd always be less with Stenmark. And same with Walter. You see the picture in L'Equipe of Roll here, brilliant, absolutely brilliant. And you'd see Roll at sort of, I don't know, 15 degrees, and a lot of other rally drivers would be slowing the car down more. And Carlos loved that. And that was one of the things he pursued throughout his life, was exactly the right amount of attitude of the car. And those, to him, they were the epitome of the art. I think with Carlos, it was even more so with Walter Roll after that famous Rally of Portugal, when he pulled out, I can't remember the numbers now, but it was a significant amount. It was something like 7 minutes or 5 minutes or something like that, over the stage, which I think is called Argonol, and thick fog. And he couldn't believe how Roll could drive that well in thick fog. And he actually got hold of Roll to ask him how he did it. And of course, a lot of it was looking out the side and not looking ahead. And Carlos was talking about the type of lights he was using and everything else. And so it was that, his ability to drive that quickly when you're not able to look where you normally would want to look for your peripheral vision, and the center of the, at the point at which you want to aim is no longer there, because you're looking out the side all the time and doing strange things and driving a lot of it from feel. And he just loved that. And I mentioned it once, but I'll repeat it. He was so impressed by that he actually put the little word Argonol on the steering wheel of the Williams, just to give him, get his mind set before he got in the car or started doing the lap. And so, yeah, it was that. It was the cleanliness of Roll and Stenmark that Carlos loved, and something that he always he was always very self-critical of that. And to be honest with you, I think it's one of the reasons he went so well when he started rallying again, because he did rally a lot in the early part of his career. But when he did that Côte d'Azur rally in 80, and then he did another one in, what was it, 82. And he finished third both times. World Championship rally, really impressive performance. I think a lot of it was because Carlos was wasn't doing what most Formula One drivers do a lot when they get into a rally car, which is throw it sideways and enjoy that feeling of throwing the thing sideways. Carlos was always trying to drive with the minimum amount of sideways loss and trying to regain the time or gain the time in other ways. And he did that very, very well. Carlos was not ever one for wanting to look spectacular in a car. He always wanted to look very linear and very, very, you know, no more than 10 degrees out of line, I would say, max. That was Carlos. Complete opposite to Gilles Villeneuve. And I think that confused Gilles when they were together at Ferrari in 78. I think like most people who were, in the early days of Nigel Mansell, most people who were Nigel's teammate always thought, oh, this will be a walkover, no problem there. Yeah, right. And it was the same with Gilles, I think. Obviously it was his first full season in Formula One, but he thought, oh, Carlos Reutemann, it's got to be better than Jody Scheckter or somebody like that, And I think I remember talking to Gilles, it was about Long Beach, so the season was underway, and he was saying, who is this guy? What is going on here? And of course, Gilles was driving from the other end of the spectrum. He was just nothing but sideways everywhere as much as he could because he loved it. And in those days, it was quite quick to do that. And, I think he learned quite a lot from Carlos, actually. Another one from Sarosh. Peter, do you think having a single tyre for the race improves the racing? I was thinking that it'll reduce the variability and be more fair to the drivers who won't be affected by the safety car, etc. Yeah, but then look what Luke Browning just did in Japan in that race. He started from the back of the grid, drove the whole race on that one set of tires. You had to make a pit stop, so it wasn't a one tire rule, and finished P4 as a result. Not bad. I mean, that's one of the things that is a good thing about having. You've got to make a stop, but I think what you're talking about is no pit stop, and yes, it would take away that business of the safety car and the lottery of where you are on the track when the safety car is deployed and what position you're in. I don't think there's a real answer to any of that, because we're in a tyre monopoly, and virtually every single-seater championship is these days, and that's a great shame. If we weren't in a monopoly, I don't think we'd have this rule and the tire change rule. Well, we might, but we may not. I mean, we mainly have it so that Pirelli don't have to build a tire that does the full race distance, because it would be a nightmare for them, I imagine, having to come up with all those different tires for all those different types of circuits in different temperatures and ambience, potentially getting around all the issues that can come up if you cannot make a tire change in the race. And it's got to last the full distance. Maybe they just build a rock hard tire and everybody goes around on rock hard tires, but I'm not sure that would happen. And if we had Bridgestone and Michelin and Pirelli, 3 in Formula One, I think it'd be a different story then in terms of the regulations. Sujo. Hi, Peter. Have you noticed how the Merc PU drivers mention unintentional overtakes and weird clipping while the Ferrari overtakes look genuine and in braking? I see method in the madness there. Yeah, I see quite a lot of Charles Leclerc seeing everybody on the outside, not under braking. So I'm not sure that's strictly true about the Ferrari, but you definitely have seen some issues with the Merc. And if you take it across the board and include their customer teams, it's obviously quite difficult to get those Merc engines, as good as that whole power unit, powertrain thing is, if you're a customer or indeed the factory team. There are obviously some fragile glitches there. I'm not sure there's a pattern there. Unintentional overtakes and weird clipping. Yeah, well, we've had some weird clipping on Charles Leclerc's Ferrari too, haven't we? Notably in China, and again, Lewis too. So I'm not sure there's a big difference there between the two. Actually, I think you're just seeing more of it in the Merc because of there being more of them on the track. That's all. Yeah, you've got the Hasses, and you've got the Cadillac, that doesn't really count. I don't know. We'll have to see a little bit more to see whether there's a real pattern there. method in the madness. Are Ferrari doing a better job, I think is what you're saying. I don't know. We'll see. Hi, Peter. Your thoughts on the drivers of the pre-war Silver Arrows era? Caracciola, Reutemann, Nuvolari, Seaman, Stuck. They drove powerful cars for their time with no safety equipment. Yeah, actually makes me think of the Artemis launch. Not, as my mate Diego Moreno said, not a lot of harvesting going on there when that thing took off, was there? Great stuff. Going back to the, and that may be powerful cars, I was thinking powerful, rockets. But yeah, interesting. The one guy you don't have in there, well, several you don't have in there, but the one of the guys you don't have in there is two really, Varzi and Varzi particularly, who I think was extremely quick when he was in good health. But of course, he was pretty addicted to morphine for most of his career, sadly, because of an injury, which I think he got in Tripoli. Caracciola, I would say, was the sort of Jackie Stewart of his era. Very polished, very consistent, very, very urbane, nice guy. Just absolutely, he would have fitted in perfectly to any era of Formula One, I think, Caracciola. But he did a brilliant job even then. Bernd Rosemeyer, he was a sort of Max Verstappen, I think. He very, very fast, came into Formula One, or Grand Prix racing as it was then, I guess, ahead of his time, probably. But Auto Union looking for young stars, and Rosemeyer was absolutely fitting the bill. Ludicrously lost his life, not his fault at all, doing some absurd record attempt on a German Autobahn purely for the glory of Auto Union, which was terrible. We lost him much too early, but amazingly talented. Motorbikes were his thing, a bit like Damon Hill, and also Nuvolari for that matter. But very, very good. I mean, absolutely right there in terms of talent. I said Max. I say he's more Jochen Rindt, I would say. Bernd Rosemeyer. Nuvolari, yeah. Nuvolari was modern equivalent of Nuvolari is probably Max, actually, given Nuvolari's versatility, Max's versatility, Nuvolari's desire to drive anything, anywhere, and loving the challenge and the more difficult it got. I suppose another driver a comparison would be Fernando Alonso, actually, Nuvolari. Similar stature, Nuvolari a little bit more wiry. But yeah, what a driver. Nobody better in terms of pace. You'd be, any driver would have feared Nuvolari in the equal car, even an unequal car, if you take the way he won the German Grand Prix in the Alpha. And a lovely guy too. Just honest, lived for his family, went through quite a lot of tragedies, personal tragedies, but lived relatively long for a driver of that era, and how dangerous it was. And to me, I suppose Gilles would be the right comparison with Nuvolari, if I really think about it. Dick Seaman, yeah, very underrated, I think. Certainly capable of winning a world championship in today's methodology. I would say he was George Russell quick. Maybe not, I don't think Max Verstappen quick, but I think he was sort of George Russell-ish. And yeah, fabulous driver. Obviously, he was a gentleman, and he respected pomp and circumstance, but at the same time, he followed his own heart, and he had a lot of personal anguish with his relationship with his German wife, and at that time, and it was a big deal for him, and obviously it was a huge deal for him when he won the German Grand Prix, and was obliged to give some sort of Nazi salute at the end of the race, and did a sort of cursory raising of the arm, which raised eyebrows, certainly in Berlin, but he got away with it. And he was a great guy. I love reading his letters. It's a wonderful book, George Monkhouse's book on Dick Seaman, and just such a tragic, terribly sad end of him. 1939, just on the outbreak of the war, and he's going very well in the wet in the Belgian Grand Prix, and he loses it there's no bus stop chicane. It's just a fast run up to the hairpin, up to the La Source hairpin. He loses it there, hits a tree. The thing catches fire, and eventually they get him out of the car. And just before he passed away, his last words were, "Please tell my wife I won't be able to take her to the cinema on Monday." And very sad. That's how it was. Hans Stuck, yeah, very like his son. Well, his son, like father, mega oversteer driver, I think. Fearless, tall, got on with it. Herman Lang's another driver I'd put in there, actually. I think he was very underrated. And yeah, considering he came up from the shop floor, actually, basically a mechanic almost, and became one of the great drivers. So Herman Lang, I think, should be added to that. But yeah, Stuck, yeah, just, would drive anything, hill climbs, very fast, very, very fast racing driver. And I'm sure, obviously never met him, but I'm sure he was very like Hansen, and had a great sense of humor, and used to be the life and soul of the party, I can imagine. And there were many parties, I'm pretty sure. So yeah, no safety equipment, powerful cars. But you know what? It's a bit like, I was talking about the 60s in the last live stream, and how in 65 the cars were basically commensurate with the circuits in terms of the width of the track and the speeds the cars were going, and your chance of doing something if something went wrong. It was about right. Obviously, safety could have been improved, and always can be improved everywhere. But given how we look back at those cars and think, wow, they were so quick. But they actually did pretty well in terms of safety. It wasn't as dangerous a period as, say, the late 60s, 70s. And that's interesting, isn't it, when you look back? But I think one of the things that is a shame is that because of the World Championship beginning in 1950 with the FIA, a lot of Formula One fans don't really think pre-1950. And obviously there's the World War II is before that, which means in effect that we're talking about 1900 up to 1939. And that period is often forgotten, not mentioned. I mean, if you go to the Formula One F1 website and all the stuff they do, they never mention any of that. And those guys they were like Max Verstappen, they were like Kimi Antonelli, they were like Oscar Piastri. They were all just kids racing cars, and they're all the same sorts of people. And I've only given a small word picture of some of them, but much better people than I who could do that. Nigel Roebuck would do a much better job. But it's such a shame that not more is done, I think, about those. So thank you very much for asking that question, Jim. Another one from Jim. On treacherous circuits, safety equipment on treacherous circuits with no power steering, actually raced in the rain on skinny tyres. I think they were some of the greatest ever. Well, absolutely, totally right. And of course, don't forget a skinny tyre is a lot better than a wide tyre in the wet. So they did have that advantage. When you think of races like Bremgarten and all those places in the rain, and how they... And when you look at the video, there are a few scratchy videos out there, and you can see, Nuvolari is just constantly sliding the Auto Union. Just unbelievable, the skill of those guys. So yeah, thank you for that. Love talking about them. Great period of time too, the 30s, I think. Sujo. Peter, the 2025 911 Porsche GTS has an MGUH hybrid system. A VW Group road car has it, and now it is not road relevant enough for Audi. I agree with you. Ferrari should have vetoed this. Yeah, and I think it's also so ludicrous, because who else spent so much time, money, and effort making the MGUH what it is? Formula One. They did all that, and they had it, and a Formula One car is about front axle braking. It is about getting a car into a corner in a way that efficient drivers can do it extremely well. And that's one of our cards, some of our show cards. That's what we should be showing to the world, how good a car is and how good these guys are when you've got a great front end. And yet they took it away. It's the most ridiculous thing. And, I just wonder whether now there is any talk in this period, but there's any talk about how we can get the MGUH back and have some sort of face-saving methodology of how we would do it, so that nobody has to take any blame for deleting it in the first place. Maybe that's, I would hope that's what the discussion is. They're trying to find a way to get it back on the cars, because it's absolutely ridiculous that we got rid of it. There's some confusion about whether Audi wanted it or Audi didn't want it. My understanding is that Audi didn't want it because they didn't have that technology on their endurance car. So that's why we said, okay, whatever, the great Audi can be where they want to be, and everybody else will play the game. And it's very sad. And it's not a power unit thing. I think that's the problem, isn't it? It was probably a power unit discussion, and yet the reality of it is that it affects the way the fans watch the drivers in the cars into corners. And the MGUH has as much bearing on cornering and handling and braking, which are all really important things for very, very high quality racing drivers, as front wing, front roll stiffness, all the things that, anti-dive, all those things that you talk about when you think about what makes a car good into a corner. Actually, the MGUH overrides all of that, and we don't have it. So Rosh, again, hi Peter, I'm a big fan of the previous Silverstone layout, especially the area before bridge. The flat-out right-hander was superb to watch on board. Overall flow was similar to Suzuka in my view. Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure what you mean by previous Silverstone, because you're talking to a guy that knew the proper Silverstone. Well, I did actually see the proper Silverstone in '67. I was a kid, obviously, watching the Daily Express Trophy Formula One non-championship race won by Mike Parks in the Ferrari, and watching Denny Hulme there in a Lola T70 Mark III-B, Sid Taylor's car, Formula 3 race, which I think Peter Westbury won, big dice with Maurice Nunn. Anyway, that's when Woodcote was just a very, very fast right-hander. And then Copse was a very fast right-hander. And Chappell was a flat-out left. And then Beckett's was a very fast right-hander, leading down to Hanger Straight, down to Stowe, which was an unbelievably quick right-hander. And then on to Clubb, which is an even faster right-hander. And then Abbey Curve, a very, very fast kink, where for many years they had to back off or brake, and we saw some big shunts there. Tony Brooks, Harry Schell, sadly, and then back to Woodcote, which it was just a really, really quick circuit. And then the first thing was the Woodcote chicane, which I think came in about '73, and it was a good thing because it was a very fast chicane, and it meant that you were braking as you were turning in. So it was a great corner, actually. I love that. And so when you talk about the old Silverstone, that's what I think about. Much better circuit, and certainly in 1990, when Clubb Corner was still a proper corner. They'd made other mods, but it was still a good circuit then, I think. And Nigel's speed in 90 through Clubb in the Ferrari was absolute. I think he was flat. I think he really was flat, and just unbelievable. That's when he was at least a second quicker than Alan Prost in the same car around Silverstone. So yeah. And for me, I know Lewis Hamilton always goes on about how I never really liked the new Silverstone, but then it's really grown on me now. It's got a great flow to it. I think that's because he's won a lot of races there, and I think any circuit grows on you, just like an ugly racing car grows on you if it wins a lot of races for you. But Silverstone, to me, doesn't have a flow, and it's very bitty, and I fear it'll be, with these cars, it'll be a nightmare, actually, because they'll be super clipping into corners like, I mean, Copse, you could argue, is still a great corner because it's, to be flat there and not lose any time being flat, the Carlos Reutemann, not scrubbing off any speed, not easy. But I think that'll have gone now because the entry speeds will be lower. And yeah, Beckett's will still be fun, I guess. But the rest of it's all, very Mickey Mouse, as they would say, as the proper racing drivers would say. So I don't get the whole business about Silverstone having a flow to it. It doesn't to me. It's like three different circuits all sort of put together by a computer and just right, this is where it is. So yeah, that flat out right-hander was unbelievable. And, Keke Rosberg's lap, 85, pole, he was definitely flat through Clubb as well in the Williams Honda. So those days have gone. Clubb Corner now is that funny place. yeah, there's all sort of there are lots of things there that are good for TV. Lots of moments under braking, assuming you're not going down the pit entry road too quickly, Oliver Behrman, and exit, they can lose it coming out as well because it's turning and they're accelerating, but it's not the same. Zavej Dugal. 82 Kyalami, the drivers protested the new super license. The same should have happened after the swearing ban, but alas, the drivers are too image conscious now. Yeah, 82. There was a lot going on there, and they did indeed protest the super license thing, and it wasn't as bad ultimately as it could have been, but it still wasn't great, and one wondered what it was all about, really. But yeah, I was there that year, and it was quite, we were rushing up and down from the pits to the, it wasn't a hotel. I think it was some sort of dormitory thing where all the drivers were. Then they bunked up for the night. Lots of pictures of that. Gilles with Bruno. Carlos next to Rennie Arnoux, I think, just bizarre things. And Pironi was a big deal in that, wasn't he? Sort of. But I don't know. I don't know what my feelings are about that, really. I was a bit annoyed about it all. Just wanted to get on with the racing, I think. I suppose imagine it happened today. All the drivers go on a boycott and they go into one big room together. It wouldn't happen, would it? As you say, they're much too image conscious now. Same from Zavish. I just watched a little bit of the 82 season first race. Why did they have such big disparities between turbocharged and normal engines? Who do you think was the best driver with the natural engines? Well, that was what it was all about. It was about it wasn't only the super license. Of course, that was the whole period of Bernie and the Formula One teams based with Cosworth engines against the FIA, in brackets, Jean-Marie Balestre, and the Grande teams who weren't running Cosworth engines, Ferrari, Alfa Romeo, Ligier. And so, was it Ligier? Yeah. And so it was that. And at the time, one wondered where Formula One was going to go, because this rule that allowed you to have a 1.5 litre turbocharged engine was around since 1966, but it was only Renault that understood that it could be exploited in 77, 11 years later, when they took their 2 litre V6 Gordini engine, beautiful engine that they built for Le Mans and Formula 2, turned it into a 1.5 litre V6 and put turbos on it. And all of a sudden, wow, this thing was unbelievably quick in a straight line. But around, that period, if you were a Cosworth runner, it was a given that the pole would usually go to the turbo cars. They would always be quicker for one lap. But then in the race, maybe you could do something. But you knew that you were going to get held up badly on a lot of corners. And a lot of drivers hated that era, because Cosworth drivers, that is, because you could just get into these ridiculous races where you'd be going so slowly around corners, and then the Renault turbo driver would just floor it and they would just disappear from the Cosworth car. So that exacerbated a lot of the angst about where Formula One was going and whether Formula One was run by the British teams and Bernie, or was it going to be run by the FIA and Balestre and the turbo thing. And so it was a coming together of a lot of different things. It was, in theory, it was political, but in reality, it was also very real. It was turbos against non-turbos. And in the end, it all kind of got solved, but not really. It was a very bad time for Formula One, and it was nothing worse for me than the 81 South African Grand Prix, when Carlos, it was a race without the Grande teams, admittedly, but Carlos won it on slicks, and Bernie had said, this is a round of the World Championship. Whatever happens, this is a round of the World Championship. And then a few months later, in settling the whole thing, he decided to strip that race of its points. And guess what? At the end of the year, his driver, Nelson Piquet, won the championship by 1 point. So, there was a lot of bad things that happened that time. But yeah, who was the best driver with natural engines, by which you mean the Cosworth DFE at that time, I guess? Well, Jackie Stewart, probably, in the Tyrrell. I mean, it's impossible to say. I mean, there were so many drivers who used the Cosworth DFV. You wouldn't say that this driver was the best with that engine. I mean, Jim Clark, he won his first race, won the first race ever for the Cosworth DFV in the Cosworth's first race, the 67 Dutch Grand Prix. So it doesn't get much better than that. He had a lot of mechanical sympathy for that engine and got a lot out of it at a time when it was pretty unreliable. So you could say Jimmy, I would guess. Um, Jez James, hi Peter. If given the choice, would an F1 driver prefer to drive with the latest technology hybrid car or a car with just petrol fuel, no driver aids on steer wheel and gear changes with a gear lever? It's an interesting point that is about the gear lever, because Rob Wilson gets a lot of young guys today who have never ever driven with a foot clutch or a manual gear shift, particularly one on the floor. And so and they don't actually like it, I don't think. They don't like this sudden thing that they've never done before. And a lot of them don't adjust and don't come back for more. And Rob says, "Oh, well, if you can't drive with a gearbox, forget it, and that's it." And I think he's right, really, because a driver should be able to adapt pretty easily and pretty quickly. A decent driver, a proper driver, very well. So I would imagine if you were to say to a guy like Max or Charles Leclerc, well, Charles Leclerc, I'm still slightly nervous about that way he broke the gearbox on the Niki Lauda 74, 75, maybe it was a 75 transverse gearbox 312 Ferrari at Monaco a couple of years ago. It might have been the 74 car, I can't remember, but I'm not sure Charles would love to have manual shift and foot clutch, because he's so into the whole thing being so unbelievably quick. But I think Max would love that challenge. I think he would. I think Oscar probably would. I think Oscar would quite like the idea of old school. I think Lando would too. George, I'm not sure about George. Too many other things he's thinking about at the moment. Kimi probably would. Kimi probably would think, oh, that's interesting. Yeah, have a go. So I think most of them would actually quite like to go back to it all if they can actually say what they think. That's one of the reasons it's not really worth asking them, because they don't say what they really think about it. They've got to say what the team would like them to say, I think, most of them, with one or two exceptions, obviously. But in general, I think most drivers would love to go back to a basic racing car. I'm sure they would. Foot clutch, hand gear change, no power steering, let's get on with it. I think we, the fans, would like that, wouldn't we? And you have no more overtaking dramas, because you just wait for the guy in front to miss a gear, which inevitably they always did. And oh yeah, got past him, he missed a gear coming out of the corner. Yeah. And usually they missed a gear because they locked up or something going in, and they're a bit flustered and a bit of understeer, and trying to sort that out, they missed a gear coming out. Jez James, any reason why qualifying can't be like a hill climb start? Then we can see each car do a whole lap and there won't be any traffic problems. Well, I think time, isn't it? The reason that they went from single qualifying to what we have now is because all the TV companies were saying all our viewers can't watch for more than 10 minutes before they get bored. So we've got to make sure qualifying always compressed into this thing. And that's what they've come up with. But if you started doing single lap qualifying with hill climb starts, I agree, it'd be pretty cool, wouldn't it? Wouldn't want to be at a Red Bull for that, would you? So boom, he's in the back of the grid before it gets into fourth gear. Yeah, I think it's just a time thing, a whole individual laps. And I think the other problem with that, not the problem, I'm just throwing up reasons why everyone would say, no, we can't do it, is changing weather conditions. You would argue probably, well, if you go out and it's sunny, and by the end it's raining, and you've got the quickest guy going out last, and he's starting from the back of the grid, that's not a bad thing, is it? Probably people would say that. But I think people, generally speaking, would rather have what we have. They'd probably say it's fairer, I would guess. But yeah, traffic problems, I agree. They are not good. Go back to gearbox, manual gearboxes. Let them all miss gear shifts coming out of corners. Then we won't have any more traffic issues. Zavage Doggo, again, sorry for the third question, no problem. If you don't want to reply, it's fine. But I just wanted to ask, who controls where the sport goes? The FIA, the manufacturers, the sponsors. I can't figure this out. You think I can? What a question. I mean, it's a very, very good question. It gets to the absolute heart of where we are in Formula One at the moment. And I've often said, and I'll repeat it now, that what we never used to have was a commercial rights holder like Liberty. Formula One, in the era I was just describing, the early 80s, 81, 82, there was no commercial rights holder. It was the FIA against the teams. And together they came up with some sort of solution and they all went motor racing. But there was no third party Liberty in there saying, oh no, Formula One has to be like this or like that. And Formula One adopted that from other sports, and Bernie took full advantage of it and decided that he without the teams knowing about it, and the FIA really, he'd accumulated all these rights to various things, and he could make a fortune by selling them to a third party commercial rights holder who turned out to be Leo Kirsch. And that's where we're at today. Suddenly, at that moment in '99, Formula One went from being Bernie versus the FIA and then coming together, and Formula One basically was controlled either by the sports governing body or the teams, which is what it was, to the sports governing body and the teams make Formula One, but Formula One is now owned by a third party, and they will decide where the sport's going to go. And they will be the ones that will control the direction of everything through a document called the Concord Agreement. That's exactly where we are now. Now, if we did not have that, and like truck racing, there was a press release from the FIA saying there will no longer be a commercial rights holder for truck racing. It'll be run by the FIA and the teams. I think you'd find very quickly we'd get back to fairly normal sets of regulations. The reason we're in these regulations are because Liberty are very exposed to the Audis of this world and to other aspects, to television viewing figures, to the internet, to the quality of the show, to fan surveys, to all the things that could actually be quite difficult to handle and are difficult and have made the sport, taken the sport to where we are now. As I said before, when it was the FIA and the teams, basically the future was viewed in terms of how fast the cars were going to go, the circuit modifications that would need to be made, the safety modifications that would need to be made for the cars, and other physics things. Now it's not. It's about how much money can Formula One make, how much can Formula One be worth when Liberty decide to sell it, and what are the factors that are going to increase those amounts of money. And so you look at the footprint, the global footprint of Formula One, well beyond the broadcasters who pay the privilege of taking the races live, and you look at the internet's footprint and you see how much Formula One has grown. But then if you look at it from another perspective and you see how difficult it is for a driver like, or impossible it is for a driver like Max to express himself as a racing driver, as distinct from just a Formula One driver who's being plugged in to do the job within the parameters of harvesting and deployment. And you say Formula One hasn't grown, it's gone backwards. You could say that. And so who controls the sport? Your actual question is where the sports goes. I can't figure it out. Well, it won't change, because even if Liberty sell Formula One for a vast profit, they sell it to, say, the Saudis, it'll be the same thing. The Saudis will be very exposed to lots of political and commercial things that have no relevance to driving a Formula One car, the performance of a Formula One car, or indeed what a Formula One car sets out to achieve. And we go round and round in circles, sadly. It's never going to end unless they get rid of commercial rights holders. So ultimately, It's controlled by Liberty. It's not controlled by the FIA or Formula One teams. It's controlled by Liberty. Hi, Peter. Which Formula One drivers had the least interest in road cars or road driving? I would say Niki Lauda, probably. I don't think Niki ever spent a lot of money, of his own money, on an exotic car. I'd be surprised if he actually spent any money on a road car at any stage of his career, to be honest. Once he got the Marlboro deal and Ferrari in '74, he's probably driving around in a Fiat. I'm sure he was. I don't think a free Fiat. I don't think he would have spent any money on buying a road car. I may be wrong, but I don't think he did. I don't think he was interested at all in that. And so I would say, who are the drivers had the least interest in road cars or road driving? Yeah, I'm still sticking with Niki. I'm going through as many as I can in, as quickly as I can. I mean, interest in road driving, like most people on the planet Earth, I think most Formula One drivers lost interest in road driving. Well, from about the mid '70s onwards, when the roads became congested and all the speed limits came in, and then radar came in, and all of a sudden it wasn't any fun, was it? But I think, in the early days of Sterling Moss putting his Facel Vega on a car ferry, air car ferry, flying it over to France and then blasting around Europe in it, I think Sterling did enjoy driving on the continent, as it was known back then. I know, I mean, the case of the yellow Elan that Jimmy Clark had in '67, he said to Jabby Cronbach, I've now rediscovered my love of continental motoring in this car. And he did a lot of driving 2 races in that yellow Elan. But it was at a time when a lot of the roads were relatively uncongested and speed limits were not something you thought about too much. You got the occasional fine, but it wasn't a big deal. And that's one form of road driving. And it makes me think of Dennis Jenkinson. He used to do a thing called Continental Notes in motorsport. And I remember he was driving back from the Targa Florio, and he was on an Italian autostrada. No, he wasn't. It was on an Italian road, but it wasn't an autostrada. It was a nice bit of road, and there was this sort of red dot in the mirror, and and Jenks is in the Jaguar E-Type, and he starts giving it some. And he was a pretty quick driver, Dennis Jenkinson, and he's going for it. And this red dot's getting nearer and nearer and nearer, and then it flashes past. And I remember he just said, as it went past, I saw the Prova Mod symbol on the back of the car, and I saw it was Lorenzo Bandini, obviously out testing one of the new Dino prototypes. I think, wow, I got to come to England and be a part of this. But of course, that doesn't happen anymore, does it? Really, I'm sure it doesn't. And so, does a guy like George Russell have a lot of fun driving on the road these days? I mean, I was always amazed. I was pretty close to DC when he was racing. I haven't seen much of him recently, but he used to be, between races, and I'd meet up with him periodically. He'd always have a chauffeur driving him around. I thought, what's this all about? He's a racing driver. Why has he got a chauffeur? And yet, I get it now. I kind of get it. So certainly in the DC era, I would imagine he was pretty much a standard bearer for Formula One drivers, pretty disinterested in road cars and driving. Actually, I remember talking to Keke Rosberg, who had a Dino Ferrari, about the road towards the Williams factory, a country road you could take from the M4 to the Williams factory. And he was saying how wonderful that bit of road was in that Dino. So there you go. There's one. That would have been what, 85, I guess, around that time he was talking about that. So yeah, that was nice. Today, I mean, do Formula One drivers they only buy hypercars, don't they? Because they get a big discount on them, and they love to have them in their garage and stuff. And periodically they drive them up the hotel to Paris and park them and then disappear. But that's about it. I mean, does Lando Norris spend money on exotic cars and love going out into the countryside and driving? I doubt it very much. Oscar might. I don't know. I don't know. Interesting to know what Oscar drives when he really wants to drive. Charles, Lewis. Does Lewis drive on the road anymore? Does he hoon on the road anymore? I doubt it. Good question. I love the idea of racing drivers, Formula One drivers in road cars, but I think you find most of them are chauffeur driven. I know Lewis. I mean, I did a photo shoot with Lewis thing. No, I interviewed him at a photo shoot a while ago when he was at Merck, and it was, he was like 30 minutes late. It was complete. It was quite late in the day. It was like 6 o'clock, and he wanted to be out there by 6:45. And he didn't turn up till 6:25 or something. And I did the interview very rushed and had to rush off. And I was driving home, and I caught up with this Merc sort of van thing. And as I drove past, I saw it was Lewis just sitting in the back. I don't know what he's doing, on his mobile phone or reading or something. And two things struck me. One, well, he's done the right thing there. He's not sitting in this traffic jam, and he's not driving himself. So that's very clever. Two, what was the rush to get away? Anyway, I think a lot of them just have these chauffeurs driving him around. But you see, I'm sorry, I keep almost thinking I've ended, but I haven't, and Jackie Stewart was one of the first to have chauffeurs as well. And I can't imagine what it's like to be one of the best drivers in the world and have some chauffeur, who obviously isn't one of the best drivers in the world, drive you around, because you would imagine that they would be very, very finicky about how a car's driven, and judgment, and going through gaps, and three parking, and 3-point turns, and reverse parking. I remember, and they are. I mean, I remember driving with Carlos to the track in Canada one year, Montreal, and you go over a bridge at Montreal where it's got big seams across the tarmac, which become more pronounced every year, I guess, because of the freezing winters. And so the car goes over, and it's cha-chung, cha-chung as you go over. But they're also there, obviously, when the road is curved. And I remember I was driving around that, and I was driving. Carlos was in the passenger seat, and we were in a slushmobile rental car. And I went over it, sort of basically keeping the car on the same line, but because it was curved, obviously the front axle and the rear axle hit at different angles going over the seam, and it went ka-chung, ka-chung, like that. And Carlos went, he looked at me, he said, "Windsor, what are you doing?" And I said, "I don't know, what am I doing wrong?" He said, "Never, ever drive like that. Never go when it's always go junk. So set the car up so it's absolutely going over square. Never do it so it's going over these seams at an angle." I thought, yeah, and I've never done it. I've always done that ever since. Always. If there's a speed bump on a corner, I would always hit it so I'm hitting it at 90 degrees, never with angle on the car. And I always think of Carlos when I'm doing that. But I don't know how typical that is of other Grand Prix drivers. I would assume of somebody like DC, who just had the chauffeur, unless it was some chauffeur, it was another Formula One driver in disguise. I can't imagine that DC would have been too upset about the way he went over seams on the road. And having said all that, I suspect Max actually probably quite likes driving still. I can see him in some sort of quick Audi or something, thrashing around Belgium in the middle of the night. Shouldn't be saying that. Chris McClelland. Hi, Peter. I know your schedule is probably planned out in advance. Not really. Chaotic, like most people. I never really think more than 3 months in advance, like most Formula One people. But it would be great to see you come to New Zealand for the Formula Regional Oceania Summer Series at some point. Such a great motorsport community in New Zealand. They would be very welcoming to you. No stuffy paddocks, great names like Ken Smith, Bob McMurray, Ross Cheever, Rob Wilson, worked with Mark Slade. Bob would be great to have on the show. Yeah. I've got a lot of friends over there as well. Pete Vale will be another. Gary Woodward, both of them in Oz, but both another two mechanics, good friends of mine. And I'd love to do that. I want to go to Japan again as well. I haven't been for a while. I need a Japanese fix on some of those mountain roads with those drifting cars. I'd love to do some of that. And New Zealand I'd love to do. And I haven't actually been to all the tracks that I used to read about as a kid in New Zealand. I haven't been to any of them, actually. Pukekohe, Wigram, Labin, Teretonga. I'd love to go and see those. And the new ones, Hampton Downs, all the rest of it. So, yeah. I need to get a Need to get some sort of Ian Young type air ticket sorted. By which I mean when Ian was working for Elf, and the likes of me would get a phone call from Ian saying, g'day, Peter. Just, yeah, how you doing, mate? Yeah, good. Just wondering if you'd like to go to the South African Grand Prix in a couple of weeks. I imagine that your magazine's probably got a bit of a limit on what can be spent, but I'd like you to be a guest of Elf, and we'll be sending you through. Assuming you're happy with this, we'll send you through an air ticket, and it'll be going out on the Tuesday before the race, and we'll book you a hotel, book your room in the Kyalami Ranch, because then you'll be with all the drivers and the team people. That'll be good, and just let me know what your passport details are, and we'll get that all sorted, mate. Yeah, if that's good for you. We don't want anything in return, nothing at all. Just make sure we call them an Elf Team Tyrrell, and Jackie Stewart and Francois Sebat, Elf. But yeah, apart from that, go for it. Those things don't happen anymore, do they? Be nice if, we could arrange something with the New Zealand organisers. And New Zealand, there we go. Let's get them going. But thank you very much, Chris, for that. Certainly something to put on the shopping list. Ronnie Way. Hi, Peter. As a previous team principal at Williams, well, I wasn't a team principal. I was race team manager. And so it's a big difference. Frank was always the team principal. It must be painful for you to see them struggling so much. And what would you have suggested to revamp? Love your chats. Williams. Well, it's like all these things. They've gone so far down the road of not doing the right thing that it's what would you do now? I mean, there was a moment when obviously with Frank's health in decline, they should have Jonathan Williams, his eldest son, should have been appointed team principal, and the key players at iSport GP2 team, which were the leading GP2 team at the time, should have come in as Johnny's generals and run the operation, and I think it'd still be going today, and they probably would be winning Grand Prix. I think would have been a very good setup. Johnny would have been a very good overall chairman, representing the Williams name and family, doing a great job globally, and you would have had really good people running it, and it would have grown beautifully. But that didn't happen, and we all know what happened. First of all, it went to Claire, and then it went to whatever it is now, Doralton, and what a mess. And it couldn't have been worse, really, in terms of where it went. And how you would pick up the pieces now. I mean, it's all about people, ultimately. I mean, if I actually, this is just purely fiction, it'll never happen in a million years, but if I was invited to go there and have a look and see what could be done to improve things, the first thing you would always look at are people with the right background knowledge, brains, can look at things from afar and make decisions based on logic rather than on their own little area. And it really broke my heart to read. Actually, it was Claude AI, so whether or not it's true, I don't know, but it broke my heart to read that Williams are now saying, or it may well be true, that the main reason they're overweight and not doing what they should be doing is because of legacy design and production problems. And that's something that should never occur with a Formula One team. Never. It's always about ensuring that you can move forward quickly. And if they've got manufacturing and design techniques that are in the Stone Age, relatively speaking, then, that's as a result of all the management stuff the poor management stuff that I've just been talking about. And that would never have happened if a team like, the iSport guys had come in and run it. Never in a million years, nor Frank for that matter. If Frank in perfect health. So once you've got that problem, and let's say it's true, let's say Claude actually is correct, and they've got this inherent legacy problem of production and all the systems that are out of date and not in tune with everything that, say, McLaren are doing, then it's a really difficult problem to solve. I don't know. I'd probably draw a line under the whole thing and say, forget it, because it means revamping so much production and design wise that it's probably not within the scope of the budget cap to be able to get away with that and do it well. But there's no excuse for it because every other team's managed not to have these issues. So somewhere along the line, it's a management issue, and that should never have happened. What would I do? I would definitely. I mean, they've got two very, very quick racing drivers. So that's the first thing. You've got Alex Albon and Carlos Sainz. You couldn't hope to have a better pair, bearing in mind your Williams and where you are. So they've got, the drivers are much better than the team at the moment. Well, not all aspects of the team. They've also got the Mercedes power unit, which is also a great thing. So they've got all that. So it shouldn't actually be that difficult to do a good job. And right now, the big question is why Alpine are doing a better job than Williams. And that's what you'd need to get on top of and see what Alpine are doing right and where Williams have got bottlenecks and get those sorted out quickly. But it's a great shame, and it does hurt a lot. And it just, to Williams for me today is not the same team. Might as well have a different name as far as I'm concerned, because it's just not the team, and it doesn't seem to respect its heritage, and it doesn't seem to echo the way Frank used to go racing anyway, which is lean and mean. Drew C. Peter, the tyres need fixing. That hard tyre can last 40 plus laps every track. Race 1, George changed hard after safety car went till the end. Oscar said in Suzuka he can still run till the end. The harder for Le Mans 24 hours. Yeah, you can make these things happen from race to race. And Pirelli said, we're taking the hardest of the range to Suzuka for the Japanese Grand Prix for these reasons. And yeah, maybe they would revise that now in retrospect and say, well, we're a bit too hard. But bear in mind, they have to make that decision months before the race. And it's a difficult thing. If they're going to be in monopoly, and you're going to have a rule where you've got to run at least 2 different compounds in the race, it's really, and you've got all these different loads going through the cars now, and different things going on, and different from qualifying to the race in terms of power. The whole thing is so mixed up and so confusing that, to me, it's no surprise that Pirelli go pretty conservative, because the one thing they don't want to do is add to the issues by having some sort of tyre drama with massive graining and so forth. And bear in mind also, Suzuka had been resurfaced again in other parts, so there were a few question marks there. The weather can be very, very dodgy there too, dodgy in terms of unpredictable. And so, I don't know. I don't think whether you can change that rule. I don't think you can, really. I think you've got to say Pirelli have been doing it long enough now, basically, to come up with the best solution to the problems. And some of them are very conservative, understandably so. It's about all you can say. Drew, Peter, Cena's price of petrol and diesel up, for those who don't know. Older IDI diesel trucks, 4x4 from 80s and 90s, such as the Fords, and older Merc engines can run on used motor oil. Salute, Peter. Yeah. Well, I just think Formula One could have done, I know you've got a couple of smiley faces there, but I think the point is that Formula One missed a trick when it decided not to stay as an absolute racing formula. Racing engines and the way the cars are lighter, just more agile cars, lots of power, and just focus 100% on reusable fuels. And that's where Formula One's expertise could really have been seen to be helping the public as well. It's a really tangible thing, a reusable fuel like that. And that's a wonderful thing for Formula One to have been seen to be doing. And we didn't. We went down the whole complicated hybrid engine route. We spent a fortune on MGUH. Then we decided to ban MGUH. And here we are with sort of half electric, half non-electric Formula One cars at a time when even the FIA are now sending out lots of press releases about hydrogen engines. And nobody knows whether electric, even today, is the ultimate solution. And of course, we all want to save the planet. But Formula One could have done that really well just by focusing on one thing: fuels. And leave everything else to be the show, to get a lot of people watching this show and understanding how much work is going into fuels. And to me, it's a little bit like the insane amount of weight that is added to aircraft because of the amount of duty free that passengers buy before they get on a flight, in brackets, rather than picking all their duty free up after they get off the plane. It's a little bit like that. Formula One has adopted a a very complicated hybrid system they didn't need to have. And the whole sport is much heavier and more complicated as a result. And it should have been light and agile. And let's just talk about fuel. That's not happening. Alessandra Durango. Hi there. Another regular. Hi, Peter. I've got tickets for Silverstone at Cops. I'm a bit worried about what to expect this year. Well, I think it depends where you are in Cops. I think if you're on the approach to Cops and you're seeing them turn in, that's a great place. You'll be able to see a little bit of differences between drivers. If you're on, I say, that means being in about the middle of the corner and you're watching them come in. But if you are actually side on and you're seeing them come in and then going away from you into Cops, you're going to hear super clipping going in there. You're going to hear them coming out of the power and you're going to think, what's this all about? Is this a formation lap or what? But you may not get that sound if you are head on to them at Cops. This is where I hope you are, Alessandra. I hope you're head on to where they're going to be at Cops. And then you can forget about you can put some headset on, pretend you're not listening to the noise at all and just watch them come in. And there will be a few drivers, you'll see, I don't know, you'll see Hadjar doing a different job in there compared with, say, Liam Lawson, for example. The way you're going, Hadjar's straight line to turn in will be a little bit more seamless than Liam's, for example, or the contrast between Alex Albon and Carlos Sainz. There will be another one probably. So you'll see it used to be a great corner. Obviously the radius has changed quite a lot over the years as well, but probably it'll be flat once they go in. They'll super clip down to a certain point, and then that'll be the point at which they go in. Anyway, I'm sure they've got very nice merchandising stalls, and it'll be a nice program well, maybe not even a program, I don't know, these days, so they're all digital, but there'll be some nice food and restaurants and stuff around. Get your t-shirt. Tim Green. Hi, Peter. Just wondering how you would go about your previous role at Williams, comparing what it'd be like to know. Well, I think we've done that one. Race team manager today at Williams, which is what I was. Easy job, isn't it? Yeah. He says with a smirk, I was a race and test team manager. So there's a lot of guys, a lot of cars, a lot of logistics, a lot of getting things, a lot of damage limitation, which at a very critical time when we were switching from passive to active, and Renault, all the rest of it, fuels. Today, easy job. Yeah, right. Okay, back to normality. Not much I'll be able to do as race team manager, to be honest. I mean, because all the decisions have been taken, and this sort of faceless bunch at Doralton. I don't know how you deal with that. What's that all about? And you just get the impression, I don't know, just going back to Williams. What I really think about Williams, I just feel there's no soul or heart to the team. I think that's really what it lacks. It doesn't have a heart and soul. It doesn't have a Frank Williams, dare I say it. But Frank wasn't irreplaceable in that sense. There were lots of Frank Williamses around at the time. There were Ken Tyrrells, there were Ron Dennis's. They're all in their own way. They all had a real heart and soul, and they all loved their sport. They loved Formula One, and they would always do it, regardless of how much money was involved. They were all just there, racers. And how you bring Williams back to that, having gone as far away from that as they are now, I've no idea. I would imagine it wouldn't be that difficult. You just go around and talk to everybody and get everybody to get on with it, and get the best people doing the right job at the right time. That's what it was. I think when I was there, it's a little microcosm of life where when I took over as race team manager, there were probably, I don't know, I had 50, I think I was 54 guys in between the race and the test team. And I would say at least 10 of those were doing the wrong job. And it was a question of seeing where they wanted to go with their careers, what they felt they could do really well, why they weren't doing that at that moment, and moving them around, shuffling them around and getting them to do it, doing the thing they wanted to do well. And all of a sudden, a truckie would not be, I'd promote him to being whatever he wanted to be. He would be number 3 mechanic or something, and I'd get a different truckie and move the fuel guy into doing that. And the tire guy didn't really want to be the tire guy, and he put him onto fuel. All these things can happen, and I don't know. I assume that's all still happening today, and you've got real people on the ground who are working in a human way, but maybe not. I don't know. I just don't know. because you never get to see those details anyway. That's the way I did it. I always tried to make sure everybody was comfortable in what they were doing, listen to them, understand their problems, spend a lot of time getting to know everybody, and trying to give them a good life and let them be happy and enjoy what they're doing. I mean, if somebody wasn't enjoying their racing, I always used to say, come and have a chat, come and have a coffee. What is it? What is it you're not comfortable about? I was very lucky to have Dickie Stanford as chief mechanic, who was very good at that as well. A little bit more disciplined than me, I think. But it's a question of listening and understanding and having a grounding in the spirit and the soul of Formula One. That's what it's all about. And that's what Williams was when I was there. It was Frank, who, bless him, just loved motor racing. And that was instilled in all of us all the time. Max Flashart says, very complicated message. Hi, everyone. Hi, Max. Another question. If asking a question, try and make it obvious. Be normal chat. Oh, okay. For example, Peter question Q. It helps a lot. Peter reading out chat loud is a very long stream. Yeah, it is. I know. Well, I give very long answers, don't I? Isn't that the problem? Long, boring answers. Max 790. Peter, I'm a Lewis fan, but I'm disappointed in him trying to defend these cars for selfish reasons. I understand they're allowed to be closer to Charles, who said he's being penalised by these regs. Yeah, well, it's understandable with Lewis, though, isn't it? I mean, he was brilliantly good, and then he everything went wrong. Abu Dhabi 21, and then all those things happened together, and then the car was shockingly bad, and he had to drive it a different way in order just to basically survive. And here he is, and I think it's understandable for somebody like that, who's been racing, since Formula One since 2007 at the front, that he's now loving it because he's back at the front again. Doesn't really care what the car's like, he's back in the front. But he's unique in that sense, I think. I'm just thinking, I did a comparison actually. Somebody asked me to do this not so long ago. I'm not sure it's going to be very easy to do, but if you just bear with me for 2 seconds, I'll see if I can do it. So let me just do this. Okay. Here I am back again. This is sorry, now you can hear me again. Sorry about that. I forgot when you put a picture in, you also have to put in the audio as well. So make sure that that's mono as well. There we go. Shouldn't have to be doing this in the middle of the show, but there you go. So there's me, and there's this picture. Somebody asked me if I could come up with some images that show the difference in Lewis's style before and after Abu Dhabi 21. And what I'm talking about when I say he's turning in later now and giving himself a little bit more margin before he gets on the power. Very difficult to do that because photographers tend not to go to the same place every year. B, the circuits on which they race have changed a lot. So there aren't that many tracks, if you actually think about it, from say 2021 through to today, where it's the same. Really a lot of change, a lot of circuits are used and not in use and so forth. And the circuits that are, not many corners where the photographers are able to get nice head-on shots showing the car relative to the turn-in area. But I came up with this, and I've got to say here that this may not be accurate. This is from the Mercedes archive, but it looks like he's on red tires in both. So it looks like it's qualifying. And certainly in 2022, he's got load on the car, and I'm sure it's a pretty accurate shot. 19, I think, is accurate as well. But anyway, that's obviously going up the hill at Casino Square, Monaco. And you can see there in 19 that he's pretty much left of center of the road, and he's going to be hitting the brakes pretty soon after that and getting a nice early entry into Massenet, which is a corner that Lewis absolutely loved and was always superb at throughout his career. Here he is in 2022, and he's in shell shock mode at how bad the Mercedes is. And look how wide he is at the top of the hill there before he turns into Massenet. He's just starting to turn in now. That's how much wider he's turning in there. That's the difference between 19, great car, Lewis at his absolute peak, going into Massenet, Monte Carlo, 22, much, much wider turn in. Interesting, isn't it? Well, now what's happened to the browser? I knew that would happen. I think I found a solution to this actually, did I? What was it? Yeah, there we go. Found it. Good. So sorry about all that. So you're disappointed that Lewis is saying that he's not disappointed with the cars. As I say, just treat him, bear in mind what I've just shown you, and you'll see why he's suddenly delighted to be back at the front. Now, he's not driving as he did in 2019. I don't think he'll be doing that into Massenet in this year's car. But I think he's got a little bit more confidence. And with confidence comes, you know, some other things as well. So I would say in the answer to that point that you're making, I would say the answer is Lewis is unique in that area. So give him a break. It's understandable that he's feeling, he wants to be really positive about it all because he's much happier with life than he's been for the last, well, since 2021. JPS 78 MA, hi there. One of two. Okay. I was watching a Formula One Academy race, really. Good. And one driver could not get a car started. The mechanic was tapping the starter motor with a hammer. The announcer recalled a mechanic saying, if it moves and it shouldn't, use duct tape. If it doesn't move and it should, use a hammer. Have you picked up any witticisms over the years? Not much better than that, really. I think that sums it up. I mean, where would Formula One be without duct tape? I mean, it is what it is, isn't it? And it solves so many problems. And it's what's nice about duct tape is if you try and buy it, it's not that easy. You can get lots of other tape, but it's not the real tape that they use on Formula One cars. And I learned that quite quickly early on in life. And far be it from me ever to have nicked anything from a garage. But if I could, it would be some duct tape because Formula One duct tape is usually great stuff. I don't know. Jack Brabham and Ron Taranak were pretty good at, you know, if it ain't broke, don't fixing it and leaving things as they were. And yeah, you know, the only other witticism really, it's not really a mechanical one, but it was from one of the mechanics when I was at Williams, who you know, who said that if you can do the buttons up on your shirt on a Monday morning, you haven't been working hard enough because you should have so many calluses on your fingers that you wouldn't be able to do it, which was finally my decision of not wanting to be a mechanic. And at least I managed to survive that. I still have so much respect for race mechanics, and we must get Kenny back on the show pretty soon just to talk about things like that and how tough and life can be, and was actually for those guys before the curfew. And if I think about now 91 and working all nighters as we did on that first Adrian 14A, the non-active car, and how tight all the fittings were and how it took forever to get everything to fit on the car, basically. You know, if I'd said to the boys, oh, they're thinking of having a curfew in Formula One for mechanics, they'd say, yeah, right, yeah, tell us that one, mate. Yeah, that ain't going to happen. Nobody, they just wouldn't have entered their mind that the curfew could even exist. It was just, you know, that was it. That was the life. Working all-nighters. Here's another one. I don't know whether it comes under the heading of a witticism, but do you remember when, I guess it was around 72, 73, I would guess, when Emerson won the championship, Jean-Pierre Team Lotus 73 with Ronnie, very quick. The Lotus mechanics actually put out, I think paid for by John Player, they put out a single record, a 45, called Working an All-Nighter. Rex Hart on the drums or whatever, you know, brilliant. Bobby Clark on keyboard. I don't know, it's probably on eBay. Working an all-nighter. The JPTL mechanics. Good day, says Extreme BHP. I was on track recently and tried to shorten corners. It almost feels like you're lifting and coasting, almost like a floating feeling. Does this sound about right? Yeah, yeah. Well, that feeling that you've just described is the feeling that I suspect Lando Norris has quite a lot. He more than any other Formula One driver that I can see, he's the guy that does quite a lot of that no brakes, no throttle, having got the car into a corner with some lateral load, no brakes, no throttle, let the car settle, let the tires feel the road squarely, and then start to do what you want to do, power or whatever. And what you're feeling is that a Max Verstappen spends much less time doing that, probably none at all. A little bit when he really needs to, but Max is either extending the straight and he's got his foot on the throttle, as hard on the throttle as he can possibly be with a slight curve on the car, or he's starting to introduce brakes against steering load, getting into a rotation point, and that's increasing brake pedal pressure against steering, and then it's managing the understeer, the inevitable understeer. So there's no moment when he's just out of everything. We're talking about the dry now. The wet is a different thing, but there's no moment. And then it's all about coming out of the brake pedal pressure at exactly the right moment as he goes into the rotation point. In the wet, it's slightly different because there will be a lot more of that feeling that you've just described. And what you've just described there is an incredibly good way of driving quickly in the wet. You go into a corner at what feels like just a tad too quickly, and you're going to have a bit of a moment. You've braked a little bit too late, a bit too viciously, maybe the car's moving, but then you just come out of everything and let the car settle, and then you're in the corner. And that's a quick way of driving in the wet. And it's the same technique if you're driving on the motorway and you hit standing water and the car, it's quite an unnerving feeling. The car sometimes moves like that, and if you're in your lane and there's a big puddle and boom, boom, boom like that, particularly if you've got wide tires, you're in an SUV or something. And the best way of doing that is the minute that happens, just take everything off and just let the car settle, and then you're okay again. But if you try to fight it, that moment, things can go wrong. And it's the same in the wet. In the dry, there was I'm trying to think of the corner now where Lando was doing it a lot in the dry. I think it was Pouhon, and I think it was maybe even in the dry. He does that quite a lot, and I think that's a Lando thing because he's not Max, but it's not bad. He does it at a moment when he's not going to lose a lot of time doing it. Just lets the car settle. I think he did it at Qatar in one corner as well, from memory, and it's just a nice way of driving. Oscar doesn't do that as much as Lando, but yeah, what you're not doing there, you're not experiencing what Max feels or Charles Leclerc, but you are touching the surface of what would be very good in the wet and of what Lando does sometimes. So I hope that makes some sense. Yeah, there's a lot of questions, aren't there? Where are we at? 12:37. Is this a cue or is this a comment? Max Flashart says, the hammer starter motor trick works on road cars once, maybe a couple of times. Flat stop on the coils, the tap moves, and it can get cranking. Good old days, yeah. Bob votes restore Britain. Don't we all? I really enjoy your channel. Great history and insight. Thank you very much. Max says, I'm actually happy they are forced to work on ideas. Strange days indeed, indeed. Pat Sev, hi Peter, do you like IndyCar? Do you think racing there is better and pure? Would Max go there in your opinion? Thank you. I like IndyCar in general, and I've always loved IndyCar since, as it was in the 60s and the 90s when Nigel was there. I'm not sure I like the cars, to be honest. I just don't really like those cars. They don't really do it for me. In the same way, I mean, there I am showing Motegi Super Formula, and some people might say, well, why aren't you showing the Super GTs? They're just as good, maybe even better. Well, GT cars just don't really do it for me. I just like proper single-seaters. I'm sorry. Call me a purist. But I just don't see Indy cars as very nice racing cars anymore, and it puts me off, really. Probably get a lot of flack for that one. Max says Pirelli tyre test at Suzuka 27 was in the wet. 427 was in the wet. Okay, good. Super Formula is great, Max. Peter, what do you think has happened? This is Jeff and Asfar. Happened to Albon recently. Ironically complained about driving style in the current car. Where do you see his ceiling as a driver? Well, he's a classic. He's a classic driver, Albon. He's actually got great transitions. He's very, very smooth. I tried to avoid using that word, but I can't really think of another one. He's very good at that sort of seamless transition from straight to steering load. And that's been his hallmark. But he's never, ever had short corners. He's never really got on top of braking against lateral load in a way that works, other than when it's a line lock corner, like, say, turn 1 in China. And he's always remained just a super smooth, long corner driver. Smoother, than, I would say, than Liam Lawson or Carlos Sainz. But all of a sudden, he's not able to do very much. It's a bit like the Max thing, you know, he's just become a very ordinary racing driver, and that smoothness doesn't really add up to anything anymore, because it only really works. It only gives you an advantage if you're going into the corner on the absolute limit and you're setting the car up with, what in his case, feeling the rear of the car. But all that's gone on demanding corners because they're super clipping into the corner and the entry is no longer decisive. So that's what he's feeling. He's driving what he feels is the Alex Albon lap, but he's not getting any result from it. Same as Max, you know, exactly the same. Different thing, because Max is unable to do all the incredible things that he used to be able to do into demanding corners. Whereas in Albon's case, he didn't do all those incredible things, but he's feeling that what he could do isn't there anymore. Max Flashart, living in Japan is a culture shock, but a good one. Yeah. I remember Ross Chiva sending me, they used to have these machines as well in Japan where you can, all the different foods, you can sort of press a button and it takes a minute to heat it up and then it comes out. And I remember him sending one message saying, "Don't choose D." And that was it. I think you need those, there you go. Dan Kinjin. Yeah. I love this guy Windsor, but I don't agree with him. I do adore his nuance. Yeah, well, I'm sure lots of people disagree with me. There you go. Isn't that what this is all about? We're all entitled to our opinions, and I love to hear yours as well. Luke Browning, P21 to P4 Super Formula. That boy wasn't playing that day. No, he wasn't. You know, a lot of it was due to that guy that seized the lead at the start, came in after 10 laps, and then was unbelievably slow in the midfield, and that slowed up the entire midfield, which enabled, it expanded the whole way that guys like Fukuzumi and Browning could take advantage with late pit stops, and they did. Particularly Luke, and yeah, it won't happen every day, but yeah, very good. Particularly after what happened to him in the wet. Max says Motegi is where Lawson was run wide by his teammate and his crash. Yeah, what happened to Albon? The car sucks. Yeah, it does. The car sucks, and Albon just not getting the advantage that he does normally. Peter, why don't drivers take hands off the wheel while crashing these days? I think all crashes this year were hands on the wheel. They were, including Max. It's unbelievable, isn't it? You'd think they would know that. What is it? They're so secure in the cockpit now, the survival cell. They just think, right, survival cell, like that. But they can still get massive whiplash through the thing. So Williams is 28-ish kilogram allegedly overweight. Yeah, well, no excuse for that, is there? But I mean, it's not only that. It was all the other stuff as well. Quite a lot of illegalities and not having the chassis, Australia, the space chassis. And Retro Gamer, greetings from beautiful Australia, Peter. Sydney, oh yeah, my town. Would you ever consider doing a live commentary on F1 Grand Prix? Really need your expertise to keep us all from nodding off during current Formula 1 TV. Well, if I was asked to, I think I would, but I don't think I will, because they think I'd be too outspoken and too negative about things they want to be positive about. Isn't that it? I think that's probably why I wouldn't. That's just why I don't. But if I was asked, I guess I would. Yeah. More likely is I'd like to just come back to Sydney and spend a few weeks there, actually, cruising around. Luke says, Peter, which track would you drop on the Formula 1 calendar and which would you replace it with? I'd drop Saudi Arabia, I think. And, well, it is dropped anyway, so there you go. Well, Turkey. I miss Turkey. I'd bring Turkey back, I think. Nice track. Lots going on there. Sepang, I've always said it's a waste of a track. We should have Sepang on the calendar. Malaysia, what's wrong with that? Yeah, I'd have one of those too, I think, back. Having said that, you know my feelings about the French and German Grand Prix. They should definitely be on the calendar, given their heritage in the sport and the role that both those countries have played in order to get Formula One where we are today. And it's a total lack of respect, I think, for either of those countries that we don't race there. And it's not just about money. We should actually have, in the same way we should have a British Grand Prix, we should always have one. We should always have a German and a French Grand Prix. So there you go. Peter Windsor, real person, AI involved. Yeah, well, you know, would anybody want to do an AI? I mean, it's ridiculous, isn't it? You go online now and you think, oh, I like this bloke. I'll think what he's got to say. And it's some AI thing creating all this rubbish. I blame Claude, the whole Claude thing. There you go. Velvet Volto, greetings, Mr. Windsor. There's been a lot of talk lately regarding V8 engines and the probability to reintroduce them. Do you think it's possible or unlikely? Well, it depends what we mean by V8s. If we mean proper V8s without any electrification, I don't think so, no. I would love to see that happen. You know I would. Don't tease me with these things. V8s, I don't know. Well, it depends what they mean. V8 as it is today, as the ridiculous engine is today, or they mean proper pure V8s. I just don't think Formula One has got it in it to go and make such a radical change anymore with you know, the aforementioned commercial rights holders there. Peter, you're a friend of Carlos Reutemann. Do you know what happened in the last race of 81? Was there a problem with the third car? I think I read something Nigel said maybe fake. Would he have won in 82 if he'd stayed? This is from Andres Bastanchori. Carlos was always, I mean, that race, Williams took 4 cars instead of 3. And Carlos was always against that because Williams was set up as a race team to run a 3-car operation, 2 race cars and a spare. And the spare was always set up for Alan Jones. And Carlos, correctly in my opinion, asked Frank when Alan was no longer eligible to win the world championship, he could no longer do it mathematically and only Carlos could win it, whether at that last race the spare car could be set up for Carlos rather than Alan. And Frank said, absolutely, definitely the way to go. And then Alan got to hear about it and understandably said, no, my contract says I must have a spare car. And so Frank then complicated it by saying, okay, we'll have 2 spare cars, one for Carlos, one for Alan. And the minute Carlos heard that, he felt, I can see this going wrong. This is going to go sideways. This is not a good thing. We're not set up for that. It meant more mechanics coming out who normally weren't at races, all sorts of weird stuff. And at the first test they did, which was I think on the Thursday, maybe the Wednesday, Carlos was very quick and ran a set of springs that it turned out would have been the right springs to have for the race. But because he was already swapping from car to car and they were trying to work out what tyres to run, he actually went quicker on a car with a stiffer spring setup. I think it was the spare car with the right tyres, with a softer set of tyres. And so the team kind of locked into running those springs on the basis that Carlos had been quicker. And it didn't really show up in practice, in qualifying. Carlos took the pole, but there was an issue with he had a shunt with Piquet, didn't he? And then he had to run the spare car. And the spare car was different and didn't have, because it wasn't being run the normal way, it didn't have, its brakes weren't bedded in by race morning. So Carlos had to bed the brakes in when he should have been going through his sets of diameter tyres, as you always did on race morning, because every set of Goodyears was abnormal. Either one of the rears was slightly bigger diameter or one of the fronts was slightly different diameter. And you had to get them as near equal as you could. Otherwise, you had this thing called stagger, which meant that one side of the car was loaded because there was a higher diameter. And sometimes that was a good thing. You set the car up for stagger, but at Vegas, you certainly didn't want that. And because Carlos had stagger, he went into the race with stagger because he was faffing around with that and also trying to bed in brake pads. Then when the stagger got worse, which it did over the bumps and everything else, the harder springs that he was running, that he should never have had, he should have had the softer ones, then made the car undrivable because it was a plank car and it was just like boom, 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 bouncing all over the place. So the shunt with PK, stagger, springs too hard, running 4 cars instead of 3, cumulative event, cumulative result, undrivable car in the race. And nobody at Williams, apart from me really, I think, had any sympathy for him afterwards, because it looked as if he'd just given up and given the championship to PK. Whereas I kind of understood what had gone on with the stagger and how bad that would be and had been. And it was shown at the next race, which was the Brazilian Grand Prix, where Villeneuve was quick and Peroni was virtually nowhere, undrivable Ferrari. Why? Because he had horrendous stagger on the car. But nobody took any notice of that. That was, well, Vegas was history by then. So it was all of that. And on top of that, Carlos had a massage from a very unusual thing for him to do. But he got to Vegas quite early, as you would from Montreal. He was staying at the Caesars Palace. And the masseur there had a big thing about how he'd been Muhammad Ali's masseur. And Carlos thought, oh, that's quite cool. I don't know what he thought. Anyway, next thing I knew, he'd done one of these sessions with the guy. And I saw him the next morning, I think, and he said, oh, I can barely move. My back's absolutely killing me. I said, what's wrong? He didn't speak. The back is impossible. And he said, oh, the masseur is pounding my back like this with his fists. I'm thinking, bloody hell, excuse me. Do you really want to do that for a Grand Prix? Anyway, I don't think it was a problem for him until the stagger and the stiff springs came into play in the race. And all of a sudden, his back was incredibly painful as well. There is a rumor out that PK set Carlos up with that masseur, or Bernie did. You got to go and do it, Bernie. Carlos, you got to do it. It's brilliant, this guy. They knew what was going to happen, or they wound him up to do it anyway. The real issue was he should have been given the points from South Africa, and he would have been world champion anyway. And then beyond that, he was quick in Canada, but when it was wet on the Saturday night, he knew it was going to be wet on Sunday. He wanted Frank to run Michelin's, and which he could have done. Frank did not have a contract with Goodyear, and he probably would have won the Canadian Grand Prix, and didn't. He couldn't find Frank. I was trying to find him to do that, and he didn't. And that was, those two things added up as well. Would he have won the championship in '82? He drove brilliantly in that South African Grand Prix in '82 to split the turbos, Renaults, at Kyalami. I think, Rosberg was the man of the moment by the time they got to Brazil. And there was, whereas Charlie Crichton-Stewart and all of the whole heart and soul of the Williams team were very much around Alan Jones. When Keke joined, they'd found their new Alan. That's how Carlos saw it. And he just thought, I don't want any more of this. I'm going to do something else. And I think it was that more than anything else. And I think the '82 season was so torrid and such terrible things happened that I can't imagine how Carlos would have come through that year driving consistently well from beginning to end. I think it would have got to him, as indeed it got to a few others. And, he was very close to Gilles. What happened at Hockenheim was appalling. So, no, I think Keke would have beaten him in '82. Toasty, it's a devalued championship because it's not proper racing. A lot of people saying that now. George clearly isn't the #1 driver at Merck. Well, I don't think he's the #2 driver either at Merck. So I don't think, those days of when you're a team like Merck, #1 driver, #2, who's #1, who's #2? I mean, the car, obviously, they're giving Kimi Antonelli is a race-winning car, and the same way George is, and that's it. He's not a #1 driver in the sense that he's got a contract which says that if he's behind Antonelli on the track and they're running 1-2 and they're more than 7 seconds ahead of the P3 runner, Antonelli must give that position to George in the way that a Michael Schumacher contract would have read, or indeed an Alan Jones contract would have read, because George probably thought, I don't need this. This is young Kimi Antonelli. Why would I need that? That's an insult to my ego. Probably wishes he had it now. So in that sense, he's not a number one driver, but he is a number one driver in the sense that every given day he's got a car capable of beating Kimi Antonelli. And I'm only of the opinion, I don't know this for fact, but I'm of the opinion that the changes that George says he and the team made going into qualifying were as a result of Kimi's pace and Kimi doing what he's doing with that car, and George going down in a slightly different direction in order to try and go faster. Whereas if Kimi wasn't that quick and Kimi was half a second slower than he was, George probably wouldn't have made those changes. And he might have had a better car in the race. And these things, whether George is thinking about them now, whether he's thinking in terms of, we were very unlucky in China, we were very unlucky in Suzuka, we just need to focus on the next race. I don't know what he's thinking, but I would imagine he's thinking, I can beat Kimi at any given moment. I just need to have more luck, I suspect, which I don't think is the right approach myself. I think it's more than that. Max says, hit the like button to show your appreciation for Peter. Thank you very much. It's very nice. Icarus 21. Peter, you're the only one who truly highlights Charles' skills. Why does the press ignore his ceiling being equal to Max? Is it short corner rotation, or are they distracted by the Ferrari chaos? A, I think they're distracted by the Ferrari chaos, and B, I think they're distracted by Charles' more emotional personality compared with Max. And so they confuse that with a driver who's perhaps a bit more confusing on the track, in the same way that people used to think of Nigel being an incredibly forceful, aggressive racing driver because that's how he was out of the car and with his handshake. Well, he wasn't. He was an incredibly sensitive fingertip touch driver. So a lot of people find it quite easy just to judge a driver based on how he comes over in interviews, those ridiculous scrums they have, absurd questions, how he behaves on the radio, what he does away from the racetrack, on social media. All those factors combine to give many people, I suppose, an impression of how this guy drives a racing car. But in reality, it has nothing to do with any of it. And if you look at Charles and the way he drives, very, very similar to Max. Beautiful to watch. Wouldn't it be ironic if the rules regarding cars are tweaked and in doing so the drivers who benefited lose their benefit? Jez Davis. Well, yeah, it would be ironic. It'd be good, actually, wouldn't it? I think it'd be quite good. If all of a sudden going into turn one, as well as George goes into turn one, actually gave you a bit of an advantage. And going into Cops the way Alex Albon goes into Cops is actually quite good and adds up to a bit of a lap time. That would be quite good, wouldn't it? I hope so. What we don't want to do is bring Formula One down. And we are at the moment. We're bringing the level down, that's for sure. And we're digitizing it instead of allowing the musicians still to create music, to quote my friend John Clark. Clark without an E too. His dad used to be a pretty good medium fast bowler for New South Wales. So next one. Any news about AI and Lando's car? Are the cars driven by AI now? Well, I think they are. Make corners great. Yeah, I've ordered the t-shirt. So when it comes, if it comes, Spanish postal systems, aside, it will be here. Make corners great again. Definitely. Thank you, Max, for the idea. Velvet Volto. So if the talent of entering a corner, rotating the car and driving the car as fast as possible is not what we're currently watching, what are we watching? It's not Formula One. It's something else. Well, it's digitized Formula One, where the engineers are saying to people like Max Verstappen, are you going to pass Pierre Gasly now? There you go. Oh, no, he's going to repass you now, Max. Max is thinking, oh, what's this all about? This is what I used to do on my gaming. Max says engineers like nominal and not performing is not option, and performing and not performing is not optimal. Engineers like nominal and not performing is not optimal. Yeah. Yeah, well, I think the engineers actually probably quite happy with it all because it all makes sense to them. Yeah, you got to harvest here, you got to deploy there, supercut here, super whatever it is. Yeah. We are watching AI applying the throttle, says Speck and Bonen. Yep. Okay. We've got the music analogy now from Velvet Volta. It's like musicians no longer playing their instruments to hear them master them, but rather musicians creating AI songs where they tweak a few things here and there. That's Formula One now. Yeah, it is. I really exactly believe that. Not believe that. I think it is true. David Money. Hey, Peter, I was watching a lot of old races between Lewis and Rosberg. Were they old? I suppose they were. Those two going for the championship. What was Formula One was all about was all amazing. Formula One has lost that true competitiveness, I think. Yeah, well, I mean, there'll be those that be out there saying, "Oh, Windsor, grizzling as ever," and we got this great battle between George and Kimi. That's the same as Rosberg versus Lewis. We've got Kimi and George now. Roll on the future. I agree with you, David, that the actual way they're competing is very different now, and it's not Lewis versus Nico in the way it was. This is very much a digitized version, and that's what we're saying here, isn't it? Very annoying. David Money, do you think if there's a yellow flag, we should close the pits to improve the fairness and the quality of true racing? You mean stop people getting advantage from coming into the pits when others can't on the lap, things like that? I think this, yes, is the answer. I think there's a good reason why they can't do that. But you suddenly close the pit lane. I think it's quite a difficult thing to do, isn't it? If somebody's in there already or whatever, or coming in that lap, I don't know. Yeah, but it would be better, obviously, if that didn't, if those things didn't define a race. But I think it's quite complicated actually to come up with clear ruling about that. Mike Stray, question for Peter. Hi, Peter. I've been thinking Ford Performance has formed the Red Bull partnership with the main aim being to purchase the Racing Bulls team in the next few years. Thoughts? Well, I think Red Bull will try to sell the Racing Bulls team to Ford or to anybody. I think they'll be happy to sell it at any point. I think they would have been happy to sell it any time over the last decade. It's just that they want so much money for it. They've spent a lot of new money on it recently in terms of assets that I think Ford would have the same problem that everybody else would have, which is if we really wanted to own a Formula One team, why would we want to pay $750 million to buy a franchise in a country where probably it's not the best to have a team anyway, Italy? We'd really want it to be in the UK, when we could start our own team from scratch. Admittedly, a lot of startup costs, but we can basically do it the way we want, get the people we want, blah, blah, blah. Isn't that's still the problem of the teams all love this thing of the manufacturers sniffing around because maybe one of them will buy my team and I'll become a trillionaire. But the problem for the actual buyers, if they use their brains, they realize that buying an existing team isn't that clever. And if you think about just a good analogy there, if you look at what Cadillac and Andretti's have done, they've basically created a new team, and it will grow organically and it will probably start to get some decent results before the end of the year. But look what Lawrence Stroll has done by contrast. He's bought what was a very good team, running near the front, winning Grand Prix, well, nearly there, and it's basically gone to the back of the grid. Now, of course, that will change, and Aston Martin, Honda will, like Cadillac, become more competitive as the season develops. But it's a good example of why buying an existing team with all its inherent issues isn't necessarily the way to go if you then throw lots of money at it, because it's not allowing that team to grow organically in a way a race team should. And it would have been interesting, would it not, if Lawrence Stroll had decided to do his own team from scratch and get Adrian Newey there to do his complete infrastructure the way he wanted to do it from absolutely ground zero, and given himself a 2-year program to get the team up and running in a nice way, probably that would work. And in trying to sort of buy this existing thing and expand it here and get this good person plugged in there and build in, and you got all the stuff from that was the old team, it's a mess. A lot of it is a mess. And that's why Formula One again, just to go back to where we were at the start of the show when we were talking about who actually runs Formula One. A lot of this is all due to there being so much money around potentially, and this system of the franchises and the third element, which is the commercial rights holder coming in, and the manufacturers and the role they play or don't play, and the politics they bring. All of it is such a confusing, complicated mess, I think. And there's nothing to beat starting a team from scratch if you've got enough money to do it initially, to get everything off the ground in a logical way, and then getting things to grow in a logical way, in the way I think Cadillac will. And they've done absolutely the right thing. The worst thing they could have done would have been to buy Renault or to buy Racing Bulls. They did the right thing. Cosmos Trek. Peter, did Frank Williams ever ask you a question and say, "Hey Pete, what do you think about an idea?" Oh yeah, many times. And usually we were running around the track when that would happen. Frank was very creative when he was running, and we always ran at a pace where he could talk, just about like that. But yeah, no, it was quite a lot of usually Frank's, it was damage limitation stuff. We need to make sure that we've got 2 mechanics in the scrutiny area after the race instead of 1 because of the ride height thing, and I know this scrutiny, he's always going to check this. It would be things like that. And he would say, what do you think about how good is Damon Hill as a test driver? He would be a good example. I remember him saying that. What do you think about Damon? What do you think about Mark Blundell? Yeah, and a lot of chat around Carlos and Nigel as well. What do you think about Carlos doing this test at Brands? Do you think it'd be better, or do you think Alan? What's Carlos doing at the moment? How would Nigel react if we were, there's a lot, yeah. As I say, most of it was running. Some of it was in the office, having a cup of tea, 6 o'clock at night, on any given day in the factory, when we weren't in a panic mode. Sometimes it would be driving to a venue where I would have some Mobil or Canon guests, and I'd be, having shown them around the factory, I'd be taking them to lunch, and Frank would be coming along to do a bit of a Q&A, and we'd chat before and after that, for example, about a few things. So here we go. Here's a super chat from Aussie. Pete, Aussie Toe Respawn. Thank you very much, mate. Peter, would you like to see Adelaide fill in for any missing rounds of the championship this year, given the current global situation? All the best. What a great question. And the answer, of course, is yes. Of course I would. Adelaide, one of my favourite races. I didn't mention that as a race I'd love to see on the calendar because I was just assuming that it wouldn't happen, but if it could and would, love to see Adelaide back. What a great race. My fear is that Formula One would feel it's too big for Adelaide in terms of the paddock area and all the paraphernalia that it brings. But Formula One should cut its cloth and fit into Adelaide town and city and make it work because it's a great place. Just on that point, going back to my thing about alternative fuels and how Formula One should have just focused on that and then kept the pure thoroughbred racing car and just talked about alternative fuels and developed a Formula E of its own. I think another thing Formula One needs to do, rather than go to 50% electricity of the way we are with very complicated regulations and driving techniques as a result, I think Formula One needs to look at its ridiculous spending on motorhomes and the way the logistics of Formula One work around the world. Now, I know it's patting itself on the back a lot about its carbon footprint, but visually it needs to be a lot leaner, in my opinion. And, if we go to 50% electrification, then we need to make sure that we're not looking ridiculous in the amount of money we're spending on luxuries. We need to make sure that the whole Formula One looks pretty lean and mean and environmentally friendly. And I know the teams do a very good job of that, but I don't think Formula One visually has done a very good job of itself. And I'm talking about the two Wall Streeters having their bagels now, talking about Formula One and whether or not they think Formula One is lean and mean and environmentally friendly across the board or not. I don't think they do. I think they think it's all luxury premium stuff. And I think that's a bit of an issue. Mike Stray. He's talking to Drew here. My old Nissan Terrano runs on used vegetable oil from the fish and chip shop. Bit of a solvent added to thin it out. Runs better than it does on diesel. Of course it does. Absolutely. Peter, besides WRC, what other, we've got the Rally of Croatia coming up, haven't we? What other series would you recommend to viewers not enjoying 26 Formula One as a positive alternative to choosing to watch Formula One, knowing they'll be dissatisfied? Thanks for your insight. Well, Japanese Super Formula, I think, is pretty good. You know, 2 different engine manufacturers in there. Yokohama tires are pretty good, and nice circuits, quite challenging, bit dodgy here and there. Changeable weather, close racing, good driving, very high standard of driving. And look at that, you know, Toyota's MD there, chairman. I think it's good. I think Super Formula is good, and it's much nicer having those nice looking Dalaras as well. You know, I'm not convinced about the F2 and F3. I know that they're Dalaras as well, but there's a lot more stuff on them that it's just, they don't look as spectacular to me as a Super Formula car, to be honest. I think I would watch Super Formula, and I'm going to start doing those highlights after every race. Hi Peter, what helmets do you have in your collection? I've got Carlos's M1 Pro Car helmet, open face helmet, which is very battered because Carlos actually gave it to Frank's secretary Jackie at the time, because she was just got a bike, a moped, and Carlos thought she needed the helmet, so she got it. But eventually it found its way to me, so I've got that. I've got a few Nigel helmets. That's a replica, the Pedro Rodriguez one from Diego Moreno, who's got an incredible collection of mainly replica helmets, but does an amazing job of detail replication in Madrid. I've got more other stuff, really. I've got a few steering wheels. I've got a Nigel 85 South African Grand Prix steering wheel, Carlos 82 South African Grand Prix steering wheel. I've got Jim Clark overalls. What else have I got? A few bits and bobs. A couple of things in the F1 exhibition at the moment. The side pod from Nigel's 92 FW14B, as raced at the British Grand Prix, as cracked by a fan who sat on it after the British Grand Prix, which is why I've got it. And I've got quite a lot of champagne bottles signed and visors, stuff like that. Jim Clark. I've got lots of autographs, actually. Anyway, yeah. I love the whole idea of the vegetable oil. Mega. I think we should do that in Formula One. So, Ozzy says, would you like to go back to 1 hour, 12 lap qualifying? I quite like the qualifying system right now. I think it looks terrible with these new regs, but if we had normal cars, I think it worked pretty well, didn't it? And just because the regs are not right for this qualifying, then it doesn't mean to say we should say change qualifying and we should change the regs, in my opinion. But anyway, thanks for that. Nice of you. Carl's 95. Who would do better, Formula One drivers in rally cars or rally drivers in Formula One cars? In your opinion, why is Formula One more mainstream than rally, even though rally is just as not more technically challenging? Well, yeah, I think rallying is brilliant because the cars are, you know, they're not obviously road cars at all, but they're quite quick. I do think that World Rally could get away with making Rally 1 Rally 2, and we just run Rally 2 cars. And there are a lot of them around, and there will be more with the new Lancia coming in. And I don't think the fans would feel any the less for the pace of what they're seeing and the cars and the speed that they're going. I think it'd be just as spectacular. So that's one thing. But I think in general, it's because it's quite difficult to watch rallying. And actually, for a spectator, it means getting usually cold, wet, hungry, thirsty, and seeing the cars for a very short period of time before you then get in another traffic jam to see them for another short period of time. So it's not a very user-friendly sport to watch in real life. And on TV, I think it's very good. They're a little bit too packaged now in the way they do it. They just, you know, follow one car on board, few overheads, then the next car, then they go back to the other car at the end of the stage. It's all a bit predictable now, and it's the most logical way to cover it. I understand, use onboards because then you don't have the expense of all the external camera shots. But why do I think that that is not catching on as much as it should? Why is a big network not buying the rally rights, TV rights, and making it somewhere near Formula One as a result? I don't know. I suppose it's because it's more difficult to understand rallying. Formula One, of course, it's complicated, especially now, but it is round and round and round, isn't it? And it is a race, and you do understand what it's all about when you see the cars massed on a grid and they go off, and you know that the car that finishes first wins the race. And when you're doing it against the clock individually, it's slightly less dramatic, I suppose, and maybe more difficult to understand. It's that. But it's a shame. I think rallying should be much, much bigger than it is. And in answer to your first question, I think it requires, well, it requires more skill, more a broader brush of skill to be absolutely quick in a single-seater racing car than to be absolutely quick in a rally car. Because by definition, rally drivers are always allowing for the unknown, a large rock or boulder online, a change in weather conditions, a very sudden change in the road condition, particularly in gravel rallies, lots of things where they need to build in an ability to react. Whereas a Formula One car, in theory, or any single seater in theory, doing a number of laps, it's all about an absolute into a corner and getting it absolutely right. And as we try to say on this channel, to do that perfectly, not easy. And there's a massive difference, even in Formula One, between the Max Verstappens and the drivers in the middle of the grid, who are basically standard Formula One drivers, whereas a Max is something very special. And I think that's the difference. And that's the difference from my perspective. Having said that, Carlos Reutemann, massive respect for Walter Roll. Would Walter Roll, had his career gone differently, been a very good single-seater driver? Absolutely. Absolutely no doubt in my mind. I think Sebastian Loeb would have been. And I think Roger Clark would have been, actually. We know that Andrew Cowan was a pretty quick single-seater driver. Obviously, Vic Elford, brilliant at both, rallying and race cars, more than any other driver probably in the history of the sport ever will be. And I think Max, if Max went rallying, I think he'd be pretty quick within a month or two. I think most of the Grand Prix drivers would be. Liam Lawson was pretty quick in the rally car at Goodwood, wasn't he? As quick as Martin Vidaga, the co-driver of Terry Neuville. So, yeah, I think ultimately, I like to think that Formula One is the ultimate test. I'm not sure it is today, but, or could, as it was in previous years, but it's still Formula One, and it still requires a lot of skill. And please never get the impression that I'm trashing or rubbishing drivers who aren't in the class of a Max or a Charles, even for those at the back of the grid, even for Lance Stroll. I mean, he does have a massive amount of talent compared with most racing drivers, let alone with the average driver on the road. And we should never forget that, how good they all are. The standard is very, very high. Hi, Peter. This is from Jays, to post 2013 V6 hybrid engines demand more of driver than post '06 V8s. Remember Brundle saying so, that they wouldn't pull the skin off rice pudding with so little torque. Demand more of a driver. Well, they were different then. I mean, the tires were different, the narrow track. I mean, you're talking about the engines, but I don't think you can separate the engines from the cars. And yes, of course, the torque rates were different, rev bands were different, fuel loads were different. But I think the skill level in around '06 was still very, very high. And if you said to Lewis Hamilton, the '06, the '07 car, '08 car, compared with the 2014 car, I think he'd probably say, well, they all had their own challenges. And I didn't see the difficulty factor, if there is such a thing, changing dramatically. Of course, the engines had different characteristics, but drivers adapt to that quite quickly. But it was still always about early turn in, doing what you could do, balancing all the dynamic weights, and all those cars you could do it, and they rewarded that. And I never saw a difference there between them. But I get where Martin's coming from. He's talking about the power thing, but the 06 car was different in that sense. It didn't have the same grip, really, probably. What do you think about Christian Samodi? What do you think about what Kimi Antonelli said in an interview about Lewis and Max talking to him? He said last year they were very open and helped me, but now they've stopped. I'm surprised Lewis has stopped. I would imagine Lewis would be all over him, because it's kind of nice for him to be seeing beating George, wouldn't it? I'm surprised that's the case. If I was Lewis, I'd be helping Antonelli as much as possible, giving as much advice as possible. I can see why Max, well, I don't. Well, help. I suppose, yeah, they're very open and help me. Yeah, why would they help him? The guy's winning Grand Prix. They probably think he doesn't need any help from us. He needs to help us. It's probably what that's all about, I would imagine. Yeah, but the better question is, what is the relationship like with George? And to me, that's the interesting one, isn't it? Because there was a moment when George would have been so relieved to have him as a teammate instead of Lewis, this young guy, this younger study that suddenly makes George feel like the senior driver, which is a great thing. And then helping, and then he has that terrible shunt at the parabolica when he's first in the car, and that elevates George even further. And then he's helping Kimi along and saying really nice things about Kimi when he goes well. Now look what's happened. That won't be happening anymore. And Don Liedo. Current regs filter out the specific driver's brilliance talent. It has become much more of a car competition, not a driver-car combo. Sad. Yeah, you're right. Absolutely. Well put. It seems like fans, says Autodoc, have come together in condemning any ability of the vehicle system controlling the vehicle's speed. Why not just make all deployment and recharging driver controlled? Well, yeah, talk to the people that wrote the rules and what they want these cars to show the public of the world. The efficiency of regaining it, the way the engineers can work them. If they make the deployment all manual, except that at lap limit, it starts flashing a light warning. It's about slow as soon as 8 mph or whatever. Yeah, I know. Terrible. Okay, Max flash out. Mario got pulled over in a Lambo and clocked 183 miles an hour in Nevada. Good on him. Only 183? I thought I'd do 210, man. Was there a speed limit in Nevada at that point? That's another good question. Who do you think you are, Mario Andretti? Yeah. Cool. But then Lewis got done for hooning, didn't he, coming out of the Melbourne track, because he deigned to have a bit of wheel spin on some road car he was driving. Put him off driving on the roads forevermore, I would think. Okay, let's talk about road cars now. Lando, Lewis, Max and Esteban love their sports, classics and kit cars. Okay, but when do they drive their classics, sports and kit cars? That's the point. I bet they do. I bet they've all got beautiful garages where they keep them. Lando probably drives them a bit. Lewis, Max, maybe. Okay, Lando has some JDM and classic cars. Yeah, Lando's good. Lawson has customized a new Supra. Oh, well, there you go. Good on him. Yeah, well, he probably would have got into that whole thing being in Japan, wouldn't he? I love those customized Japanese cars. Autopi. Hi, Peter. I wonder what the war in the Middle East will have on Formula One. As I understand, they have invested a lot in the sport. Love the live stream. Well, they have indeed invested a lot in the sport. And indeed, Formula One's invested a lot in the Middle East and takes a lot of money from the Middle East. So they'll be petrified that will be drying up. I doubt it. I mean, as I speak today, there seems to be some sort of ceasefire going on. Didn't need to start in the first place. But anyway, there's a ceasefire going on, and I suspect, money will rule and Wall Street will rule and we'll get back to normal relatively soon. We'll see. I hope not. I just feel so sorry for all the people that have suffered because of this. Lando does drive classic cars. Good. Lewis bought a Cobra. Good. Yep. Good. Have we seen Lewis driving the Cobra around? A friend of mine actually had a Cobra in the 60s and had it on Dunlop yellow spots, I think. And when it was wet in London on a relatively domed road and he was parked here, he actually couldn't get it back. It was just wheel spinning so much he couldn't get it back onto the road in the wet. Yeah, Cobras. Okay, there we go. I think Fernando wants a solid car collection. Yeah, well, we're not asking if they have car collections. We're asking if they actually enjoy driving on the open road these days and what they do drive on the open road when they're doing nice A to B trips, as per Jim Clark in a yellow Lotus Elan. That's what we want to know. Of course, they've all got car collections. Any self-respecting Grand Prix driver has it written into his contract that if he scores X number of points, he gets a free Formula One car from that season, preferably the one he drove. So, Fernando likes to drive them in Monaco. Well, yeah, at 3 miles an hour, sadly. Yeah. Oh, I'm sure Leclerc will have lots of classic Ferraris and all that stuff. Yeah, checking out Rodin would be cool. Yeah. Kiwis love dirt oval racing too, right? Yeah, I do. I love dirt oval racing too. Be interesting to see if some young sprint car driver would have a run at Formula One. Yeah, it's a great shame that Tony Stewart never got the chance to come over to Europe, or was given the chance to come over to Europe. I think he had the talent as well to make Formula One, and he was unbelievable on sprints and ovals and very good on road courses. Just outstanding driver, outstanding talent. Jeff Gordon would have been another. Anyway, there you go. Okay, Val's mentioned issues with outdated production methods. It's why they had to supply issues yet season. Yeah, I know. What's that all about? Claude is a sponsor of Williams, ironically. Yeah, I know. That's why I keep mentioning it. I keep asking Claude why they're so slow. And he keeps saying, legacy production problems. Toasty doesn't mix words here. Is there truth to all this battery garbage being basically Toto's fault? Probably battery garbage. There you go. Very good. Hi, Peter. Gavin White wouldn't be too impressed to hear all that stuff. He loves all this battery business. Hello, Peter. Howdy. Is Merck hesitant in hiring Max as he can criticize the team in public? No, I don't think that'd be the reason they'd be hesitant in hiring Max. I think it would be, who do they replace, wouldn't it? They don't want to get rid of Kimi now. He's the new megastar. And equally, George is pretty good. Is Max going to do a much better job than George in these cars? I don't know. I don't think he would. Probably not. But he'd just be about the same, wouldn't he? The only reason to have Max would be if he went into proper cars. And otherwise, Max might as well just stay where he is and say what he wants and drive Mercs around the Nürburgring. Have some fun. No, I mean, being super serious, if Max wants to win a world championship next year, obviously he would be thinking of Ferrari or Merc, I would guess. Maybe McLaren. And the only chance really would be at Merc, probably. And then he's got, he'd be happy to drive with Kimi or George, I guess. But it's a difficult problem for Toto, isn't it? What would he do? Swap deal with Red Bull and put George in the Red Bull? Maybe. Okay. Autodoc says, I don't see hybrid technology as anti-racing at all. It makes the cars faster. Just don't let the car control the power available at any one time. Just cut it off when rules require. That's it. Well, why don't we just go back to where we were last year in that case? I mean, we like hybrid technology in a way. It's a pretty good thing. MGUH, excellent. Let's just go back to it. Why did we change it? That's the point. Continuing full manual regen control and full power available proportionate to pedal travel until lap limit reached, then flashing light inside and outside the car. Yeah, kind of, sort of. Sounds a bit. Go back to where we were, I think, would be a simpler solution. Again, I know a lot of people are going to be annoyed with me that I haven't got through all the questions, but I've been going since what? For an hour, 2.5 hours. Time has flown, I must say. It's all because of you guys thinking, and I must thank you very much again for all your input, because this show wouldn't exist if it wasn't for you. Trying to find some other questions. G. Ozalian, haha, like that policeman telling Ayrton Senna, who do you think you are, Nigel Mansell? Yeah, exactly. I think there's a Sterling Moss one about that as well, isn't there? David Jokerlots, if the cars neutralise top drivers, and how come the top drivers are still top in the championship? Well, Mercedes have a very good car, so no surprise that the two Merc drivers are. Ferrari have got a better car than they've had for a while, so no surprise that those two guys are. But Red Bull have got arguably the best driver, and they're nowhere, so they're not still top in the championship. Or am I missing something here? So anyway, I think there's a lot of... I don't want there to be somebody who's asked a question that I haven't got to. GR's Alien, while not specifically open wheel racing, Loeb managed second at the 06 24 Hours of Le Mans and had success in the World Touring Car Championship, so he knows his way around the circuit. Yeah, absolutely. Loeb, sensationally good driver. Got a lot of time for him. Max says, we'll want to thank you, Peter, giving your insights and time. Thank you so much, mate. It's very kind. And I promise I'll try and get that T-shirt sorted for next week. It is on the way. So there. Yeah, I think we kind of got through it. There's a lot of people not happy with Formula One. I'm not. The great exaggerator says, always enjoy your chats, Peter. I hear you talk about Chris Amon at times. Didn't he win a non-championship Formula One race? He won 2 non-championship Formula One races. He won the Argentine Grand Prix in a Matra, and he won the Daily Express Trophy in a March. Yeah, very good. Formula 2, he won at Solitude in a Lola. And of course, he won a lot of he won endurance races and Can-Am type races. Very, very quick driver. Unbelievably quick. I'd say the most talented driver never to have won a Grand Prix counting for points. But then a lot of great talented drivers won Grand Prix that didn't count for points, including all of those before the World Championship was invented in 1950. See aforementioned comments at the beginning of this video. Good. David says, I'm enjoying the 26 Formula One season. The drivers need an additional skill set. Max is complaining because his car is uncompetitive and he's just grumpy. I'm sure he is grumpy. So what is the additional skill set that Max needs to acquire? That's what I'm interested to know. What is it that if Kimi Antonelli got into a Red Bull, he'd be doing now that Max isn't doing? I don't think there is anything. I think that is the point. There's nothing Max can do with any of his additional skill sets, and he's got plenty of them to get around any of these issues. Max says Super Formula is what good racing is all about. Yep, I'll buy that one. Okay, that's it, guys. Thank you so much for bearing with me. Big thanks to TrackNinja, OEM Exclusive. Don't forget to get your original parts there for cars like Audis and Ferraris, Jetcraft and REC watches. Thanks for watching all this, and thanks to you, the viewer, for being a part of it. Absolutely brilliant. Loved it. 2.5 hours just flown by, and we'll do more very soon. Thanks for watching. Take care.